Hello and welcome everybody to episode 63 of the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I still, as you can tell, don't have a camera set up, which means that I prefer that my desk points in this angle, which is the desk is facing the wall, pointing towards the door. It's better for space, but right now since I don't have a camera and I only have a webcam, I can't just point the webcam at the wall and then show me on the wall with like a table, which is what I want to do. So it's in progress here, and as you can tell, the lighting is much better today. Might even be a little bit too good. Your boy's looking ghostly. But hey, for those who are not watching this live and aren't seeing the stream, you're missing out on, me looking angelic for once. I might have to turn that down. Let me see if I can even mess with that now. Turning down the exposure, the brightness. That's better. I'll deal with it some other time. Yeah, I'm wearing the coat today, as you can see. Also underneath the coat, it's my jujitsu shirt, if you can see it. Looks like he's got this person in a triangle. Or no, they're just grip fighting. Yeah, I got this from competing in my first jiu-jitsu tournament. They give you a t-shirt, at least for just showing up. You get a medal if you win. I got a medal, but it's just a generic medal. There's nothing fancy about it, so who cares? Whenever I actually get a cool medal, maybe I'll show you guys that medal. Until then, mysteries to solve, MMOs to talk about. And the first one that I want to talk, participation trophy, basically, that's what t-shirts are. I mean, you spend like $80 to $100 for a tournament, and if you don't win your first match, most of the time, you don't get another match. So like my first tournament, I lost my first match on 2 points, and basically my own fault kind of deal. Second match, won on a submission. Most of the time, if I go to tournaments, if I lose the first match, I don't get a second match. But there are some tournaments that are round robin, which allow you to get multiple matches, but it's not very common. It can't be an NS stream without NS mentioning jiu-jitsu at least once. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a permanent thing pretty much. Martial arts in general. Even my nerd friends would always ask me random shit about martial arts just because they knew I was ready to like spout some shit off. I think it's one of those things where conceptually it helped me understand combat, I think, really well in video games, because a lot of the same concepts exist, like for example, you can have somebody who's a bit of a button masher in real life, right? In martial arts, right? In sparring, just like you can have a button masher in a video game. And I think that there's a lot of overlapping similarities there. But other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of other overlap, right? There's not virtual reality fighting games yet, so once that becomes a thing, though, I think people will be a lot more interested in martial arts, because then they'll want to be like the coolest, Naruto fighter, coolest Dragon Ball Z fighter. No, t-shirts are where it's at, and I like the t-shirts. It's for me, the t-shirt's more of like a memory, because what is it? If you lose, I guess it's an $80 t-shirt basically. So you better keep the damn t-shirt. So I want to open up the floor for the roundtable today. I've got Card, Lemposs, and Black Runes in the lobby. As you guys know, the roundtable is essentially just bringing on everyone. We react to a couple of things together, and we definitely usually have a weekly topic of discussion to go over. This week's topic of discussion is concerning raids. And the question of the MMO roundtable for the week is, how would you innovate raids? Currently, as they stand, to give a little bit of background, a raid is essentially a large group oriented PvE excursion, so player versus environment, and it's a group content where you usually combine a number of groups. Sometimes in some games you might have like 8, like in Final Fantasy, but in other games like WoW Classic, for example, you might have 40. And other games you might have 20. It's usually just a higher number than a typical group dungeon. Raids usually have some sort of attunement process, have some sort of quest line, and then essentially have bosses throughout the actual raid itself, which is usually instanced, that are placed around with certain mechanics and certain difficulties. And then you have a number of trash mobs, they're called, which are just like different NPCs that are littered around, which aren't usually hard for you to kill, but if you pull too many, they might kill you. And so each of these boss locations are, always going to be the boss location. Each of the boss mechanics are pretty much always going to be the same boss mechanic. And so if you're getting the drift is eventually, after you get your gear, and maybe even as you're getting your gear, there's a great chance you could get bored because the experience isn't really changing a whole lot. You're kind of experiencing the same thing. It's kind of like doing a single player mission over and over again, even if it's one of your favorite missions. Even that eventually gets boring. Throwing in the other players does make it more exciting. I think that's just the case with anything. Obviously, that's why I like MMOs, but throwing in more players, I think in this case, kind of exacerbates the problem, because then you have to do even more raid runs, right, to get gear for everybody. And so it's almost like once you realize that's kind of like the loop in a game like WoW, for example, you kind of have to just accept, is that the kind of game that you're wanting to play or interested in? Because if it isn't, then you're probably not going to have much fun. But anyway, that's a little bit of backstory on raids. They started primarily in EverQuest. They were big, massive bosses that could kill a bunch of players, so you had to group up together to fight them. Over the time, or over the years, I should say, they've been evolved in some ways. Like, for example, there's multiple bosses sometimes in the same instance. Sometimes there's mini bosses up to a main boss. Sometimes they've had things like AQ, for example, in WoW, where raid bosses created events. So they've done certain things like this. I think Guild Wars did some things like that, but not a whole lot, and not a whole lot other than that. And so that's kind of why I wanted to ask that question for the week. Why, or not necessarily why raids haven't been innovated, because I think we can figure that out, but how would you innovate a raid? See people on Reddit playing Mass Effect for the 30th time. Like, how does that not get boring? It's a pretty good game. It just speaks to them. I played Legacy of Kain probably close to 10 times. 30 times? Yeah, I mean, I played KOTOR, like, mind you, let me add some caveats here. Whenever I replayed the shit out of games, it was typically because I had nothing else to play. Like, I was a young kid, and I've told the story many times, like, I didn't really have a lot of money, and when my parents divorced, I was living with my mom, who was basically never around. So I got heavily into games like KOTOR at that time, and they kind of became my like escapism, if you will. And KOTOR 2 was like the big one that I got into first, because I randomly played it before the first one for some reason. So I played KOTOR 2 first and experienced that one. And I wanted to keep replaying the games because they were enjoyable for sure. And the plot was, like, back then for my young, 13-year-old mind or whatever, was pretty complex. But at the same time, if I had other games to play, like if someone bought me other games or I could afford other games myself, because sometimes I'd trade in my games or like do chores and for other people, basically like walk their dogs and shit, and like, try and like buy games on discount. Then I would have, right? I think I would have just been playing something else. So anyway, it's just interesting to think about that. I know there are people who do like to replay things, but I think there's certain games that are fun to replay for sure. But past a certain point, they kind of, most of them, at least for me, have that point where you're kind of like, all right, this was a fun little experiment, but now it's not so enjoyable to do like long term. I'm not going to do a long term playthrough. We used to play games so many times just because there was no other games available. Yeah, I think that kind of is pretty typical if you think about it. All right, so to get into the shit, I want to ask you guys in lobby first. Do you guys want to help me react to some of the MassivelyOP awards? Because, they had their award show, and since they're kind of the biggest MMO outlet that we have, that's why I like to react to their stuff, and they do good work too, to be fair. All right, you guys want to react? All right. That's funny. Hey, how's it going? Hold up, let me change my voice. Okay, can you guys talk again?
Sure.
Alright, cool, I hear you.
Talking.
We're doing it live. Alright, let me get this link for you guys. It seems like their awards are kind of linked all over the place. So I might have to find them individually so we can just look at all of them. That seems kind of...
Sweet ad revenue.
You think that's why?
It's a
Wouldn't
possibility.
surprise me.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying because I have to like scroll all the way back and like look for it. Alright, well, we'll definitely look at the Studio of the Year. This is our version of the TGA, right? Like the MMO TGA, like no one really cares about it, but we care about it because we're in a bubble.
Just leave the needles at home, please.
Alright, I think... Oh wait, there's another one. Damn it. I really have to scroll back and find these. Well, if I would have known this, I would have done this before for sure. So sorry.
Can't you, on the top there, just select columns so that you only see the columns and not all the other articles? That should reduce the scrolling a bit, or not? No.
Oh no, I think it's just a drop down or something. I have a good amount of them open.
This podcast really has gotten to the dogs.
Well, you're on it.
Well, I'm here to save it again. I'm here to make 6 pixels under deep again. Need a strong man to tell the people the hard biases.
Well, started late, light's not working, and looking for the right articles. Classic.
Hey, it's not my fault they didn't design it in a way that made sense where you just have one link you'd click and it would just show all the award links. That seems like it would make sense.
As I said, you needed ad revenue. You want people to come back to your website.
Alright, so first we'll just react to Studio of the Year.
Yeah, we can just see it on the stream, I guess.
Okay, that's fine then.
That was Grinding Gear Games, right?
Yeah, so... Hey, thanks Langdus for the subscription. Welcome to the Nor Club. Here's your tip. And a non-witty comment to boot. Yeah, it says awarded to Grinding Gear Games last year. So, let's see.
Wait,
it won
last
again
year?
this year.
They won again?
Yeah, so 2 years in a row, Grinding Gear Games has won the MMO Studio of the Year. Let me say that again. MMO Studio of the Year. Okay.
Don't fall for his tricks, guys. This is a rant. Careful now.
Oh god.
No, of course, no, it's not really an MMO, but frankly, I still think they deserve it just because they are such a good developer comparative to the actual MMO developers.
I think it's pretty much that. It's like, okay, these are actual MMOs. Are any of them made by companies that we like? Oh.
Well, I think
bugger.
the developers are 10. I mean, some of them are okay.
Alright, we just take Grinding Gear Games out of the picture here for a second then. Let's just pretend that's not on the list. And we look at some of the other things that were mentioned. Andy McAdams said ZeniMax, Square, but he didn't have a strong opinion. Brianna Royce said first choice was Pearl Abyss. Carlo Lassina said Pearl Abyss. Chris Neal said nope, just Grinding Gear. Colin Henry said ZeniMax, Square Enix. Justin Olivetti said Pearl Abyss. Oh man, I thought he was one of the good ones. MJ Guthrie said Artix. I'm not sure what company that is. Digital Extremes. If those ring a bell.
What is that Digital Extremes make?
Oh, Digital Extremes is Warframe. That's right.
Ah, gotcha. That's
I
also
mean-
not an MMO.
I know.
just seeing Pearl Abyss on there and knowing that they own CCP now is just like, oh, why? How? How can you like that?
Yeah, and
Well,
then Tyler
I
Edwards
think-
said he voted for BioWare. So there you go, guys.
Wait, BioWare?
Yeah, React.
Oh, right, they do. They do technically make.
I guess they still have 2 people.
Probably. I would say out of all of those, I'll probably put it on Square.
Why do you guys think? Go ahead.
I was going to say, surprised that old school RuneScape's not up there. The Jadex.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that too. No mention.
Blizzard is neither. That's only the biggest MMO, or at least used to be. They apparently it's like nope. We're instead going to look at. We're going to nominate Pearl Abyss because they make a better MMO. That's a tough sell, I would say.
But right now, it was probably pretty hard to still dislike Blizzard.
Probably. That I sort of just ignore them. It's like, you guys did great for so many years, but now you're not doing great, so we're not gonna mention you any longer. We're gonna look at the new guys here, who many of them aren't exactly new guys.
And also, let's be fair, what did they really do this year to make say like, oh, this deserves an award of any sort?
I'm not gonna say it.
I mean, honestly, backstory for me, Classic is not something that you say like, "Oh, you've done such a great thing." It's like,
no, I was thinking something completely different. That wasn't even about the. Oh, that was another instance of this year. It's like,
oh yeah.
I'm not getting this podcast taken down.
So something I don't understand is, so this is a studio award, right?
Yeah.
And so what qualifies as like a good studio? Like, what do they mean by that?
I don't think
What's the
that's
criteria?
really described, is it?
What's the criteria?
Oh,
I think it's just based on feelings, how you feel about.
Is it like how much content they release?
It says it judged the studios on what they did within the MMO genre this year specifically. That's all.
Pretty vague.
That's
so then the winner makes
how
a
many of them
whole lot
even
of
did
sense.
much this year. Oh, right, actually, Square did release an expansion.
BDO released all those cash shop items. That's right.
I mean, for CCP, Pearl Abyss, they released full-on gambling, so I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, I just feel like it's interesting because like obviously they see themselves as a outlet, right? Like a journalist outlet. And I feel like they kind of made that apparent whenever they did their Kickstarter to form MassivelyOP, because if people don't remember or don't know, weren't around back then, it was Joystick before, and then I guess Joystick was bought out, or I don't know, I'm not really sure what happened exactly, but Massively, was terminated. And so they came up with a Kickstarter, made their own website, and they have some good writers who've done some really good pieces, but it's just weird because I feel like the ethics are the thing that I'm the most questioning about, and I can't help but feel like it's because of the nature of advertisement. Like, I've seen BDO ads on this website like all the time, so it's like maybe they're not a Pearl Abyss hater because it benefits them to not be a hater.
I don't know. Generally, it's just one of those things with a lot of these awards is like, okay, on what are they based? Just our opinions, but then the opinions are not really explained, which is why, in my opinion, I don't think pretty much all of the awards that are out there are really without any value except for marketing.
I will also say that, this year there hasn't really been an MMO that I would say is that deserving of a nomination or award, an award for being the best designer. Not it hasn't really been done a whole lot. Like, I think what Cinemax and Square has released expansions, but not something mind blowing. It was like that's not exactly that much. It's probably why it did go to grinding gears, because they at least do something once in a while, shake things up. It's like have one of the fairer models.
At that point, like, if there's nobody that you say that is deserving of the award, don't hand out the award.
You know, God, you know, people and start questioning. It's like, oh, why didn't you make this award? Clearly, it should go to the company that I play the game of. Come on.
Because people need to be educated.
I want someone to do some snooping in the chat. Maybe if Ludens is around, to see what does Justin Olivetti write about a lot. Does he write about Black Desert? Because this post seems like it's literally written by like someone who you did an advertisement deal for, and they wrote the tweet for you. It says Pearl Abyss had a tremendous year as it slowly solidified into an MMO powerhouse. Not only did it have the popular Black Desert Mobile, and EVE Online under its wings, but it announced 4 new titles at G-Star that showed a lot of promise. This is a studio to watch. But none of those games are even MMOs. They're not even massive. I feel like he's smart enough to know that.
Is Black Desert not an MMO?
I think the only thing you can do in the game is group to grind. But we have a BDO player here, so why don't we just ask him?
Me?
Yeah.
I would classify as MMO, I think, because it's quite a lot of open world stuff that makes it feel like it's MMO. There's a lot of player interaction. You can just flag up anywhere and kill people. And there's also node wars, which is their main PvP open wall system they have.
So what's like the
MMO
biggest?
than a lot of other games. Sorry.
I was gonna say, well, like, what's the biggest size for like a group in PvE? Like, is there raiding or group dungeons or something like that?
No group dungeons. The largest size is just grinding together in the size of a 5-man party. But Node Wars is like 100 plus people.
Node Wars.
I'm not finding anything by Justin Olivetti about Black Desert. Him writing.
I wonder if it's just because they announced a bunch of titles and he's just excited about that. But I've seen like other pieces that he's done before. I feel like the only other knack I've ever had against the guy is he's a raging Lord of the Rings Online fanboy. But I don't know. I find it interesting that people are so openly supportive of Pearl Abyss when, I mean, just looking at their track record already, even with EVE Online, there's some questionable things. And even the players of EVE themselves think that they're questionable. So it's weird to hear people outside of the game who've never played, these games that are actually being affected, kind of talk about them and be like, oh yeah, this is great. When it's like, that's not what the tenants are saying.
I mean, it's clear that you never played it. Because if you play EVE Online right now, people are really not too happy with how things are going. And that's putting it mildly.
It might also just be because he hasn't played it and just looked at numbers. It's like, oh, okay, this big company, they make a lot of money, they bought another MMO. Be on the lookout for it. It was like sort of just very shallow look.
Well, then why isn't NC Soft on the list? They announced a bunch of MMOs, and they also make definitely the most money out of any of the other companies.
Well, do NC Soft themselves actually have a developer? Or are they just a publisher?
They're an in-house developer as well. Like, Lineage is developed in-house, but they do have, obviously, developers they work with, but I would say a good amount of their work is in-house. They're so big, dude. I think they have like 1,000+ people that work there.
That might be because they didn't play any of those MMOs, I guess. I don't know. I mean, when it comes to awards like that, it's really freaking tough because unless you played the MMO, there's not a whole lot that you can sort of really say about the developer.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at like headlines and articles and like economic reports and it's like what update reports,
Thanks,
etc.,
John
etc.
Dragak.
I mean, that's not the full picture. It's like you kind of need to play the game to sort of get a real sense of feeling of how you sort of feel about the actual developers. Like, what is their feedback on the whenever they like talk to the community? But do they listen to you? Do they make changes that the community wants? Do they go against the community? It's like there's just this whole list of things that makes this category kind of weird. And I think that's also why it's not got good nominations, because it's really hard to make good nominations on MMO developers like that.
To me, like it almost feels like the Red Dot Design Awards, which companies like to brag about, and it's like, yeah, the only way you get one is if you pay a lot of money and you get your product in there, and then you get an award. That's a bit how it feels like. As you point out, some of the text is very marketing speak, and quite often, of course, these awards are used immensely in marketing by those companies for their games and stuff like that. So there's probably a lot of that in there. I mean, at least there are not companies like Wargaming in there to add to the insult to injuries.
I mean, speaking of awards, it's like developers just can't help themselves. It's like, oh man, we won a bunch of awards, and it's like I always feel the amount of awards that are given out in correlation to how many games come out. I'm fairly sure there's more awards, because it's like there's games who've won hundreds of awards, and it's like, what the heck is going on here? It's like, that's a lot of freaking awards. And it's like, oh, it's won over 65 awards, many of them being in the exact same genre by like 20 different outlets. But, which, I mean, to some extent speaks for itself, I guess. It's like a lot of people seem to like a game if it has a lot of awards. That I wouldn't say they exactly go against convention. Some of them are, however, a bit controversial from time to time.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things that you've all kind of said it best already, that if they just explained it better, the award better, I think it could have made a lot more sense and it wouldn't have been problematic. But for me, it's problematic because when you're kind of like the main source of news for a lot of people, because even like the MMORPG subreddit gets a lot of their stuff from MassivelyOP, and so if not MassivelyOP, then there's not a whole lot of other websites that are still around besides MMORPG.com, but they show like MOBAs and a bunch of other things on their website now. So MassivelyOP might be still one of the only primarily MMO focused, and when they are just interchangeably using the word MMO and MMORPG to just mean like anything, basically like anything that's multiplayer and RPG, it just like for me as the for the market as a whole, for the genre as a whole, it hurts it overall because it makes other people start to think along the same sorry but flawed line of reasoning, and then we get fed the same crappy games basically. Or at least told that we're getting a game that we're not actually getting, right? Like when someone says mobile MMO, like how many MMOs how many mobile MMOs are actually MMOs? Like how many of them actually allow for more than like 30 something people on the same screen? There's actually only a couple of them that do it. And so technically most of them aren't even MMOs. And so that's why to me it matters, because next thing you know, they're going to be calling everything an MMO, and it's already kind of happening. It's already kind of happened, if you will. But let's move on.
This was going to end in a rant.
Yeah, no, let's move on to the next award. The next award is the biggest MMO disappointment. And so I'm curious to hear all what your answers are. So we can ask individually, but first let's react. Actually, I'll just ask you guys first. Then we can react to what their answers were, so we're not influenced. Starting with let me see who's in order. Starting with Black Ruins. What was the biggest?
Give me a second. I'm still thinking.
Okay, I'll pick Card then. Card, what was the biggest MMO disappointment of 2019 for you?
That's going to be a tough one because it's between the not really an MMO, but most people consider it MMO, and EVE Online. So it's like EVE Online's recent and also expected decline and introduction of like full-on gambling. Like, yeah, we built this system into our game to support gambling, and it's like absolutely horrible, which was a massive disappointment to see happening because it's like, I still believe that I could turn that game around, but they just seem to be content in kicking it into dirt and milking it. And then the other company that seems to be doing the same thing is Wargaming. And especially like around World of Warships, they had the whole Puerto Rico disaster, to put it mildly. And of course, the sad thing is it works out exactly as they all have planned, because they know people will just rage about it and then they will forget about it and just move on. But considering that's not really an MMO, I'll keep it on EVE Online.
My turn.
Yeah.
WoW Classic, which that's a dangerous one to step into. But I mean, I haven't really played many other MMOs that I've sort of went into with much anticipation. It's like, I knew ArcAge was not exactly brilliant, and I kind of knew it wasn't exactly my game, but still wanted to try it out just to see if there was anything entertaining. Been playing Guild Wars 2, which I don't actually think I got played while there was any updates going on, so I sort of just caught up, and it's like, yeah, this is fine. This is sort of what I expected to sort of play when I play Guild Wars 2. And I was like, okay, well, it's like back to not playing it anymore. So yeah, WoW Classic, really, because I don't know, it is a 15-year-old game, and that's always sort of hard to realize, I think, to some extent. I think that's also because there were just things that annoyed me to such great extents constantly that I sort of it was sort of disappointing, because I don't know, I've got used to certain quality of life features in games, and when they suddenly lack, you do end up being somewhat disappointed, because you realize I'm going to have to spend a lot of time making up for the lack of the quality of time. And it's like, that's unfortunately just not worth my time. It's like, it's a fun game, but there's a long distance between the fun, unfortunately, and I can play games that give me more fun.
I want to go next.
Mm-hmm.
I would say ArcAge. I was really hoping to see a lot of the communities from like Black Desert that we had, where a lot of the PvP side of communities would come onto ArcAge and have this like drama-filled fest of PvP, and it really didn't end up being like that. There wasn't a lot of MMOs this year that I was really excited about, to be honest. There's really honestly nothing. There was the delay in Crowfall and Acid Creation, but that was kind of to be expected anyway. Other than that, yeah, there was really nothing.
I think I'll say, kind of, by the way, just to show off a little bit, but I put the Discord overlay on the stream, so now you can actually see who's talking, like the people's name, and then it lights up. So it'll be easier for the viewers to see, but for some reason, Card's name is not coming up. I don't know why.
Discord knows. Can't let his opinions come out.
Can y'all notice that? Like, I don't see Card up there, but for some reason I can see Black Ruins and lemposs.
did you illegally download Discord?
Yeah, did you
I
get a
am just
pirated Discord,
too-
dude?
I'm just too evil to be seen. As Lemposs always says, my soul is so black, it might be a black hole.
But to answer the question, I would say the biggest MMO disappointment for me is a mixture of Arcade and a mixture of WoW Classic. And to start with WoW Classic first, my biggest disappointments come from the way they handled launch, the way they handled post-launch, and then the way that they handled the most recent BlizzCon, which is just, for me, they're clearly at this point going to just breadcrumb and try and make as little moves as possible, and then just try and, like, you know, I guess I would say, stretch it out as long as possible. And I'm just not really interested in that, because at the end of the day, you're still playing a game that's like 15 years old. So it's like, I'm not going to wait around for months at a time for them to just, you know, finally decide to put the content in with no plan in sight. Like, they've not told us, like, after the content comes out, then what? Like, are they going to do some other kind of server? None of that's been confirmed. So that's been a pretty big disappointment for me. And obviously how they've handled Honor and PvP, it's something I've talked about before, but I think it was a total miss to not put Honor in at launch, just because, ultimately speaking, they waited to put Honor in thinking it would, like, fix an issue of not ruining players' experiences. But considering players play on PvP servers, for example, to PvP, I don't understand that reasoning. And then on top of that, the problem still happened, just even worse. Whenever they released Honor later on, it just became, get the best gear as possible, have the best gear when Honor drops, boom, just get as big of a group as possible, and then just Zerg fight. And it's just, it's either that or big gank groups, and that's the main way you play the game. There's not a whole lot of other kinds of PvP, and I feel like having Honor at launch would have actually been better for PvP, because then they could have actually had PvP happen organically and actually give you some sort of reward for it as well. But by the time they, you know, released Honor, for me, at that point, I just kind of realized, well, the game is either going to be this way or this way, and that's just not fun for me to play on a daily basis. So I would say that. And then I would say with Arcade Unchained, the thing that was, for me, the most, I would say, disappointing about it all was just simply, like, they waited, like, way too long to announce that they were delaying it. And then when they did delay it, it was clear that at that point they couldn't make the deadline that effectively. And it was a big reason why they screwed up their economy and created so many different bugs and exploits. And it's just one of those things where I've talked about it with Card before, but I think companies like Gamago calculate kind of their risk and their return. And they sort of have a plan where a game, after they acquire it, is going to launch or relaunch at this certain point and make this certain amount of money. And I think that them flubbing the details on things like the Arch Pass being exploitable, on certain bosses being able to be farmed on repeat, for the massive gank groups that just ran around and killed everybody. These are issues that are, like, honestly pretty obvious, and, like, issues that you could see pretty early on if you had a test. But since their test didn't last that long, since the servers were getting just absolutely destroyed, the login servers especially, you could barely even get into the game. It was just like a clear example of a publisher telling a developer, you guys need to launch this shit now. And they, you know, ended up kind of, I think, a lot of the time these companies are looking at certain projections for profit, but they don't understand that with an MMO, since it's a very unique style of game, if you mess it up in the beginning, you're going to do immeasurable damage to your game. And sometimes games, MMOs especially, you can look at the statistics of this. Feel free to go look at how many MMOs have made comebacks after being essentially near the brink of death. There's only like 2 or 3 of them that I can think of really that have done it. And it's like, that's pretty crazy to think about when there's that many MMOs that exist, right? So it's like, it's not very often if an MMO doesn't do well in the very couple of, first months, the first 3 maybe, they're probably not going to do well. Historically, that's been the case. So yeah, with Arcade Unchained, I think it was just they flubbed these details and not thinking that they're that big of a deal because they're not familiar with MMOs, and that happens so much with publishers. It's like they just launch a game, they're like, just launch the game. It's a game, but they don't understand that if you ruin the economy, for example, early on, you're going to make people want to quit. And I think that was a big reason why people started quitting ArcAge Unchained, was just simply because you don't know like what's fair at that point. People got banned, but then they unbanned them again. And it's like, you guys said you were going to have this hardcore stance, but then you didn't enforce it. And it's just like, made me kind of realize ArcAge, because they so desperately tried to cling into some way of monetizing it besides a subscription model, I think it was kind of just like flawed from the start. It was kind of made that way. It was always made to be based around some form of monetization deeply involved into the game. But that's where I'm gonna stop ranting. You guys want to go to see what their writers had to say?
Sure.
All right. So the winner was the cancellation of Perea Chronicles and the decline of Guild Wars 2. So it's like a tie. So Perea Chronicles being canceled, I did find interesting. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I had been following it briefly. I don't really know why it was canceled. It just seemed like whenever they tried to do the closed beta testing, they just didn't really have much success with it and kind of wanted to go back to the shop and start over, which I think is pretty interesting, but I don't know a lot about it. Now, the decline of Guild Wars 2, I think a couple of us here know a little bit about it, and we've been talking about that all year. So I think that's a really good choice, actually, for this award. Just simply because it's like, with Guild Wars 2, let's just get right into it. They have this ArenaNet, and more specifically their overlords, NCSoft, have this like gem, right? Like, I think Guild Wars 2 has flaws, and I might complain about it in certain ways, but I think for what it's worth, for the type of game it's trying to be, which in some ways is basically just living up the same legacy of Guild Wars 1. And once I kind of have realized that now, that's why I've been interested to go back and just try it, just to see if I go in with that perspective, if it'll change my mind. I think it will, by the way. And that's the perspective of looking at it more like a multiplayer online RPG, I think will make the game more enjoyable for me. But anyway, I think that ArenaNet and NCSoft, they have a gem with Guild Wars 2 in the sense that they have a game that has been largely not super controversial. I mean, maybe people have had disappointments about like the PvP experiences and things like that, but like largely I'd say it kind of had a lot of positive hoopla surrounding it. Feel free to disagree if anyone disagrees, but I think Guild Wars 2 had mostly a good reputation. But it just seems like, because NCSoft as a Korean company isn't really sure how to handle it monetarily speaking, because it doesn't make the same gangbusters numbers that their mobile MMOs and their other old school MMOs like Lineage make. They're kind of just like, they don't have as much interest in it. And I think a big part of that is because it is an overseas project for them, and I've talked about this in other videos before, it simply doesn't make as much profit for them. They have to spend a lot more money than they otherwise would if they just made a game that was locally successful. And, you know, frankly speaking, if you guys didn't know already, Guild Wars 2 is not successful in Korea. So that's a big reason why they're kind of on this perpetual like chopping block for a while, because you just, whenever a game for NCSoft isn't big in Korea, there's a good chance that it could be shut down. But now that ArenaNet was basically like gobbled up and kind of merged with NCSoft West, I feel like this is probably one of the best answers. Like, the decline of Guild Wars 2 I'm going to take that as my answer as well. I just simply think that it's a game that shouldn't have declined as fast as it has. It was mishandled, frankly speaking. And I think that with like a tighter ship maybe, and then slowly trying to maybe scale back up with the goal of having more big sort of content, I think is possible, but kind of a long shot, just because that sort of content is so expensive and long to make. It takes a long time to make, a lot of labor. I think another idea that they could go with is just simply making the game, I guess I would say like Guild Wars 1 style, where it's kind of, dare I say, maintenance mode, but still like supported, you know, with basic bug updates and that sort of stuff. And I think that could work for a while, and I think Guild Wars 2 is the type of game that doesn't necessarily need a massive audience, but I don't think that'll necessarily work for NCSoft. I don't think they'll be okay with them just operating like some sort of maintenance game. And so it makes me really wonder to go a little bit further with the decline of Guild Wars 2, especially going into 2020, what is going to be the future of Guild Wars 2? So I'll pass it off to one of you guys.
I think they're just going to only be doing living story. Really, I don't think that. I doubt they're going to release a big expansion again. I think they are limited to only releasing living stories, which is just a single map where there's a part of the storyline, and then just like a bunch of events, bunch of collectibles, a bunch of grindy stuff that you can do. Which, I mean, to some extent, is kind of weird because that's essentially what Guild Wars 1 was to some extent as well, sort of in between the expansions and sort of as it died, or not died out, but sort of fell into decline. That was also sort of what they did, was adding a little bit of stuff once in a while, but nothing big. Which, yeah, I think that's what Guild Wars 2 is going to end up being. Which, yeah, it's a shame. Of course it is, because it's a good game that, as you say, nothing really controversial. It's like, it's an almost flawless game in a lot of ways, at least in regards to, like, there's no big massive bugs, there's no massive glitches, there's not massive problems that just completely ruins the game, at least not to my knowledge. There probably is. So it's it's a fairly non-controversial game, which probably has also helped. I mean, it's what, 7 years old now? Yeah, it came out in 2012. And it's like, it did fairly well for some time, but then I think to some extent the writing was sort of... No, actually, that's not true, because I actually think Heart of Thorns almost had less content than Path of Fire. So they actually did end up almost making more. Which is kind of weird, actually. That's actually kind of weird to see that, like, you go from an expansion that had sort of quite limited amount of content to suddenly have one that was quite a bit more content. Which, I don't know if that means they were going in the right direction in NCSoft's eyes, and it's like sort of supported that they got more money to work with, or if they just had gotten so much better at doing their job that they could do that. But yeah, it's a shame, because I think ArenaNet is a really good developer. It's like they've done a lot with their game, and it's a game that runs well, at least partially, depending on how many people that you have. Yeah, it's like, it is a shame, because it's a lot of good people who've lost their jobs for a game that I mean, I wouldn't say it's my favorite game ever, but it's a game that I think it's the MMO I've returned to the most, because you always, because they never did power scaling, it's a game that you can always come back to and be prepared to do the new content without having to, you have to do this raid 100 times before you are allowed to do the next raid. It's like, nope, you can just basically go in, do the stuff you want. Which, granted, also means that people then also leave fairly quickly again, which is probably also somewhat where the issues lie. Monetization, that's one that it's one of the better ones for a buy-to-play game. For a buy-to-play game, I think it might actually be the best one, because I think the only good thing you can really get from something like line boxes, which you need to buy keys to open. So they're loot boxes, which, boo, shame on you, ArenaNet. I think it's very limited, the good things that you can sort of get out of those things. It's only cosmetics, which in a game that is very much about collecting cosmetics is, of course, to some extent, paying to win. But yeah, I don't think I have any more to say about that game.
Card or Black Runes? You guys want to have anything to say about Guild Wars 2 or?
All I'll say is that's what happens with theme park MMOs.
I mean, I've played it for maybe 2 weeks when it came out, so I'm not really one to judge in this case.
Okay,
I'm saying
yeah,
God.
fair enough. Lemposs, I'll say that I told you it was going to be by the beginning of the next year, and as soon as I'm done with this WoW review, I think maybe Guild Wars 2, Elder Scrolls Online, or yeah, I think either one of those might be the next MMO I'll do a review on. So maybe it'll be Guild Wars 2 because it's a long.
None of those are MMOs.
Well, that's what the review is going to talk about then.
Are you going to freaking lie to the people? Are you trying to take my job now?
It's more that they're reviews, but I will say that if I reviewed it like an MMO, then blah blah blah.
Ooh,
but ultimately,
that would hurt.
If I reviewed it like this, it's la 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 la, etc.
I think actually one interesting thing is sort of the legacy of Guild Wars 2, I think, to some extent, because they took public events and they made that big, like real freaking big, which it's interesting to some extent. Like they oftentimes used it to tell some amount of story about certain areas, and definitely the first couple of times you do those events, it's kind of cool. Like I'll give them that much. That's quite the experience quite often. The 100th time you do it, unfortunately, it gets less interesting. So they've sort of created this good thing, but then to some extent also made this monster of a concept that if ever replicated, it's like, oh no, not again. No, not this again.
It reminds me of like your Disney World. And let's say Guild Wars 2 is Disney World right now. And so Disney World's like, hey, let's just make more content, aka just get more rides, right? Simple enough, but they only have so much real estate, and it's expensive to get more real estate, and it's also expensive to build more rides. So you kind of, if you compare it literally to a theme park, it makes a lot of sense. Like Black Runes was saying, I think it is a consequence of being more like a theme park, because Guild Wars 1 had the same problem too, which is like, after you've gone through it on a couple of your characters, which you did go through with a couple different characters because it was fun, you didn't really stick around. But it was true also, like you said, Lemposs, that you still came back later on, and I've done that multiple times with Guild Wars 1, where you could come back later on and still come, play, basically level up another character, maybe play one of your old characters, and you never felt like you were really missing out on anything too much. But that kind of content, just like you were saying, it's a wonder in itself, and it's certainly impressive. But I think, if I may, I'm willing to bet that we're not the only people who saw this in hindsight. I bet you there's people who were involved in the creation of Guild Wars 2 who realized this after a certain point as well. Like I don't know what period of time they realized it, but I bet you they realized after a while, like maybe second expansion or something like that, they probably started to realize, oh boy, this thing didn't wow. We kind of need to wow, otherwise our content is just too expensive.
I don't know about too expensive, because they like that's sort of the weird thing, right? Because the game is still making money, right? Like, yeah, sure, of course it is in decline, and it's like that would eventually show itself within the game, because it's like you simply can't keep as many people on board to create the content. But it's like it's always kind of weird that it's like, oh, here you have a game that makes $100 million. It's a failure. It's like, what? That's just always weird to sort of think about it. It's like, but I mean, that's sort of just the concept of big companies, I guess, that you need to make a lot of money to satisfy them.
I think this was a
also,
trend. Go ahead.
I mean, it's not also just like, oh, we make this much money per game. Like, companies, of course, they tend to just look at the profit margins on things. Those are generally far more important than the actual profit made. Because if I can choose between a product that has a 60% profit margin versus a product that has 20% profit margin, then probably I'm gonna like that 60% product a lot more, because it's a lot safer for me to run. Because it can, like, if I take a hit in the profit, I'd probably still be profitable. While if that product with a very narrow profit margin takes a hit, it probably will lose money immediately.
Yeah, that is true. That's probably where Guild Wars was problematic, because I think that game is quite expensive to make. Like, with all the stuff they throw in, it's a good-looking game. They have a bunch of voice actors. Yeah, its profit margin are probably not that great, which is probably also why NCSoft is cutting them off at this. Well, not cutting them off, but it's like they're downsizing them, which, I mean, I don't think that's going to make it better, because that's just going to impact the game, and then people are just going to leave. So you sort of end up in the same situation where it's like, well, the money you invest is most likely going to sort of give out the same amount. Or it was like, you might see a small period where it's like, oh, your new savings sort of make up for it. But I mean, it's going to impact the game sooner or later. It's like, there's not these magical people on the team who are just sitting around doing absolutely nothing that people don't that doesn't somehow improve the MMO. It's like, that's quite rare that you can find enough people that you can sort of fire and still keep the same quality of product that you're used to. Quality and quantity of product. Quantity is usually something you can make up for. But quality, you can't. At least not in the steel industry.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify that, to clarify, it's not that Guild Wars 2 isn't profitable. So revenue is actually not the correct word to use, because I can't say I know this for sure from NCSoft directly, but based on looking at their financials and from what I've heard and read and studied so far about NCSoft, Guild Wars 2 is very much in the green. It makes the money. It's profitable. Like, it doesn't just exhaust resources. It makes money. The problem is more so it just simply doesn't make enough money. It makes comparable money to older NCSoft projects that cost way less money to manage. And so it's a nuanced thing for NCSoft. It's not just simply that, oh, the game is sucking or the game sucks, because I've said it before, the game does well population-wise, market share-wise. I think it also has a really good reputation, which is something that you'd hold on to as an MMO publisher. I think it's more so that, they think about how much it costs to manage it overseas, and then they think, is that profit really worth it for us? And it just, when you're firing a good portion of your workforce, you're kind of making the decision for them, which is that your game, like Lemposs was kind of stating, I'm sorry, at this point, doesn't really have a choice but to kind of die out. And that's just because of the nature of how the game is designed. If your idea is, oh, let's just reduce costs because things are too expensive right now, let's keep the game going, you're basically saying, let's put the game into maintenance mode, because it's not like it's going to miraculously just have a massive jump in population randomly because of nothing happening or nothing changing with the game. You know what I mean? Like,
well, until you start playing it, people are going to stream into it. Of course, nerdSlayer. You have that kind of clout, right?
They'll get a big surge when they announce it will close down.
But hey, I mean, let's hope at least that, like, all those people who got fired, and when the game initially shuts down, I mean, it's gonna shut down someday. I think that's fair to say. That they find a good home, because I think there is a ton of talented people on the ArenaNet teams. Like, they made a really beautiful, well-functioning game, and that's, I won't say it's a rarity, but it kind of feels like it's become a rarity. That's like, you have these really smooth working games.
They lost a lot of those talented people, though. I think that's that's an unfortunate part about the whole process. Is like, I think Brianna Roy said it best. Like, I mean it when I say that, and I think that'll be my explained in my review. Because obviously, though I'm doing a review on Guild Wars 2, if you guys have followed me before, watched my video on Guild Wars 2, I played the game at length. I just didn't really play the PvE portion that much. So there is a good portion of the game that I haven't really experienced, and I mean like put like hundreds of hours into and really took the time to experience it. I haven't done that with all the PvE content, and so that's a motivation for me to want to go back to it. But it's also because I think just like whenever I went back and experienced SWTOR, that if you look at games that are, in my opinion, improperly genred and actually properly genre them, the games are actually also more enjoyable. Like, you actually enjoy the game more. Because when you stop looking at SWTOR, for example, like it's an online MMO where you have massive Star Wars battles and space battles and shit, like, stop thinking about it like that. Think about it more like it's KOTOR 2 online. Then you'll be like, wait a minute, this is actually a pretty good experience then. Like, the story's pretty good. I get, to voice different options, make different characters. The leveling experience, well, it's too easy, but at least it's not that difficult. I think with Guild Wars 2, man, I think I'm going to enjoy that experience a lot more because of the change and the shift in perspective. One thing really quickly, to go back to Yosotoi, or Yosoi-tai. Is that saying like I am Thai? Is that what you're trying to say? Because that would make sense, because yo soy in Spanish is saying I am. Yo soy Thai. Yeah. I wonder.
An H Thai.
I am Thai.
Isn't there? Wait, what?
I was right. Yeah. It just means
an H in Thai.
I am Thai. I was gonna say, you asked earlier if Guild Wars 2 is not considered an MMO, then is there other MMOs or quote unquote MMOs that are not considered MMOs? And the answer is yes. I think a lot of people feel that I'm just picking on their game whenever I say it, but they don't actually understand that my criticism is broad. Like, the same thing is levied against ESO, the same thing is levied against Final Fantasy 14. If anything, just more so in those cases. Like, I'm extra hard on Final Fantasy 14 because it very much has just about no massive content. Like, just literally, it has no massive content. And it's something I never noticed before, but whenever I was looking through their content, I was like, wait a minute. They don't even have anything that's considered massive, like, content-wise. And so I was like, this whole time, us Westerners, and I'm not going to get into that rant again, but, us Westerners have been looking at the Eastern game with the wrong lens, basically. Because they are looking at it differently than we are. So I think that's an interesting part of the perception.
I think it's like Guild Wars 2 is one of those who really, really skirts the lines. Because, I think the biggest sort of problem essentially is because of the zoning. Because there is only so many people that can actually be in a zone at any given time. And that, I don't think it extends above 150 before you're sent on some other server or some other part of the mega server that runs all those zones. But it's also kind of weird because it's probably the MMO where you will find the most people sort of doing big world content, because it's made that way. So it inhabits a very weird place where it seeks the kind of content and world that an MMO is, but it doesn't fulfill the actual technical parts of it to sort of that you would sort of need to fulfill to actually be an MMO, which is very weird.
Multiplayer online RPG.
Well, it's not an well, actually, it's one of the few who was an RPG.
I think that's the main explanation for me.
That game. Sorry.
I was saying I think that's the main explanation for me is multiplayer online RPG, like,
well, I mean, the
open world theme park.
Well, the problem is that they are oftentimes aren't RPGs. Not unless you yourself go out and RPG. It's like the game itself doesn't fulfill it. rarely. You don't make any choices. It's like you can't exactly change your character outside of certain perks and like skills that are be in your class, and rarely that you can even do much about. But as the others are telling us, we should move on because we are ranting nerdSlayer.
All right. Let me find what the next one is. All right, so then the next one is best MMO trend. So what do you guys got? What's the best MMO trend to come from the year? I don't even know if I even know one.
Games that say they are MMO but aren't MMO.
Damn
loot
you.
boxes! Yeah! People love the loot boxes.
Gambling. We love gambling.
Consume. Open the boxes. Gamble away. Has there even been any new trends in MMOs?
Good ones?
Actually,
no.
actually, there is one trend. So it has to win. It's releasing years old, or years, if not even decade old MMOs again. It's like, woo! Second round, boys. Let's go. I can't wait for Rift. Oh, actually, they already did that, and it failed massively. Whoops.
Yeah, I mean, really, I can't think of any trend that is positive in the MMO world right now.
Well, it's also kind of a slow-moving genre. So it's sort of... I mean, if we could include stuff like all the ones that are currently being made, I would say the focus on PvP and sort of implementing a bit of sandbox elements. Not complete sandbox, just elements of it. I would say that's a nice trend to see, because I think that's something that has a lot of value, which could turn out well. But those are not... I don't know. Trends. I mean, does it count if the game isn't released and is only being made and is only in concept?
I mean, I like...
No,
Go ahead.
That's the trend. That's the trend.
What?
Crowdfunding MMOs. That's the trend that we are looking at, and it's looking good, boys. There we go. Winner of the year. No
Wrong trend.
Gosh
I
darn
mean,
it.
did we have any big ones this year that launched in crowdfunding? Because I can't recall any. Most of it that's out there, I believe, is just older crowdfunding titles that are ongoing, either good or bad, or somewhere in between.
I forget if Legends of Aria released this year, or if that was actually last December.
Might have been this year, yeah. But I don't think they
There you
were
go.
crowdfunded.
Actually, were they crowdfunded?
No. They were just small company. Made in Unity. I don't know, it's kind of a weird question. The best MMO trend, I'll say gameplay wise, like inside of a game, it'd probably be what I think, I can't remember which one of you said it, but adding like slight sandbox elements bit by bit, I think has been good, because it's been introducing people who aren't really used to those mechanics to such a thing. And it's funny because to use a slight example, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but Lazy Peon has talked about he got into PvP actually because of Guild Wars 2. And it was because of the world versus world. And so that is like a perfect example of a mechanic where you can kind of give people the taste of something at kind of like a smaller scale, if you will, because it's not the full game, if you will. But then you can go experience that in another game, you know, hopefully soon, whenever it launches, or maybe an older game if you're interested in playing those older games. But I don't know. I think that's definitely a good thing for an MMO trend. I would say for me, it's going to be the rise of kind of classic game design. You know, I think has been really interesting to watch, because although older games, you know, that are successful still have flaws, just because they're successful doesn't mean they don't have flaws. their flaws are outweighed by, you know, arguably the great flaws of the current generation of, you know, quote unquote MMOs, I would say. So yeah, I think I would say that, yeah, maybe classic MMO design still proving that it's still very like valid and can be taken seriously as a place to start at least. So I hope that at least, you know, inspires developers to come in the future. They look at that and think, well, we can at least start with a basis like that. We can build, you know, the innovation on top of it. But anyway, I digress.
I don't know, man. We spent a decade of getting copies of the classic experience, and they all fail. And it's like, are we really expecting them not to make that exact same mistake again? I mean, one can be hopeful.
I mean, ultimately speaking, it's going to be a lot of mistakes, and people are going to screw up a lot more great MMOs. Like, that's just the sad truth. But I think that's just part of, like, dare I say, without sounding too Mass Effect-y, that's part of, like, the human struggle, you know? Like, we're going to keep making duds every now and then and screwing up wonderful games because of problems, you know, that exist in society and also in business, you know? Things like greed and things like mismanagement and a lot of that stuff that I've talked about in my series, Death of a Game, of course. But
I think there's a lot of philosophers and theologists who would like to beat you over the nose for saying that human suffering is somehow a quote from Mass Effect.
One thing I will say, a trend in the new upcoming MMOs is that a lot of them seem to be sandbox. Is what I've noticed. I think that's because a lot of them are a lot smaller MMOs, and so they can't really afford to have the developer made content all the time. So that's why they're going into the more sandbox area. I think like a lot of examples: Astro Creations, Pantheon, Chronicles of Illyria, Crowfall, Last Oasis, Oath. They're all sandbox. That's a trend I've seen.
I mean, certainly a lot of sandbox elements, but I'm not entirely sure it's like fully sandbox, is it? It's like, because it's like you mentioned Pantheon. It's like, I will admit I haven't watched a lot of Pantheon, but I haven't exactly gotten the impression that it's sort of entirely a sandbox game, is it?
no,
Like
it's
they're going to have a lot of pre-made stuff, right?
it's EverQuest basically. It's a newer age EverQuest.
But I mean, that is one of those things. Like, I don't think you necessarily have to go full sandbox. Like, I think it's fine that developer also throws in like a couple of things here and there, just like to sort of at least keep people in the right direction of what this game is actually supposed to be about, not whatever fantasies you yourself can come up with. Because, I mean, that can lead to a whole slew of its own problems.
I don't think I meant like totally sandbox. I meant like they have more sandbox features.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good thing to sort of throw in, and it's a nice addition. It's just, I hope they do it right, because that is one of those things you can do sandboxing correctly, which I think. I don't know how many freaking Minecraft clones came out. It's like many of them didn't, or some of them at least, didn't even understand the very concept that game sort of had for going for itself. So, but yeah.
Before I get Card, you gonna go?
No, I was just like, all right, show us the real one.
If they say loot boxes, I'm gonna flip out here.
Oh, right. I forgot to show you what they voted for.
Yeah, that's what we want to see now.
All right. Let's see. They said rogue servers. The rise of rogue servers, and they referenced WildStar having a rogue server. WoW Classic. That's not really a rogue. That's official, but they use that as an example. Old school RuneScape, all the shards and Ultima Online. They're not really like a very specific, But yeah, a lot of private servers, the rise of classic servers, and things of that nature. That's what they voted for. So similar to us.
I don't know, man. That's a weird one. I guess it's a good trend because it shows interest in those old designs, I guess. Is the point one could make.
I wish I had the other review open still, or sorry, the other award open, because I'm trying to remember what Andy McAdam said earlier for the best studio. Because now he's talking about the death of loot boxes, and I'm wondering if he was a Pearl Abyss guy. now my curiosity is gonna kill me.
That's like be just a bit careful and not just like these guys are selling out to Pearl Abyss, all of them.
No, it's not him. He's a ZeniMax guy. Which, by the way, ZeniMax has loot boxes in their game.
Yeah. ESO is not much better. Well, actually, I think they're almost worse in some regards. Which, oh boy.
I'm just a consistency guy. Whenever I see inconsistencies, it triggers my brain. And
well, they're consistently corrupt. Okay, that counts something.
So yeah, that was their answer. Before I move on to the next one, I need to, before I forget, say thanks to Card, because while I was talking earlier, he gifted 5 subs to us, and those were, I think this is all of them here. Meowth, Chaos Dwarfs, Higzilla, Every Hole is a Goal, and I think Drowercorn as well. Yosotai, I Am Tai. He also subbed, thanks. So that's 6 tips that I need to do, and then also Captain Rex. Thank you for joining as well, Captain Rex. Good to see a member of the Legion here. No, I'm just kidding. A member of the Clone Troopers. Or what was he again? During the let's see, Attack of the Clones, was he a captain at that point? Or was he a... I don't know. I can't remember the lore that much. I read the books, the Karen Travis books, and I was really into 501st and Rex and Fixer, and he was a captain during Clone Wars. All right. So let me get those tips going. And then I think there's like 2 more, yeah. You kind of get used to tipping when you wear a fedora, to be honest. It feels like it's just the natural thing to do. Okay.
Well, adjusting the hat, essentially, to some extent, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's basically what it is, in a way. Kind of, you can readjust it.
Pull it a bit down, pull it a bit forward.
Yeah.
I know, because I was just thinking I do the same thing with my Viking helmet. It was like pull in the front to sort of adjust it a bit.
All right, next. You guys ready? It's the best MMO business model.
I don't know. No. Why is that an award this year? That's just a general award that you should give once, and that's it. Discussion over.
Guild Wars 2 won it last year, for reference.
It's not like we come up with new methods every year.
Kind
of.
Much
the same deal.
Also, like Guild Wars 2, for example, remember they did the templates just recently, and that pissed a bunch of people off. So you can also like make changes to your existing model that maybe will make people not want to give you that same award.
I will say it's a bit weird to get angry at the developer for giving you something that you wanted. It's like, well, guys, we need you to pay a little bit if you want like even more of that. It's like, no, angry right now. Give me more. It's like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I would actually give it to Guild Wars 2, even though because of the templates, very controversial, very big. Simply because it's like, yeah, I've paid for that expansion and I get everything else for free that I really want. It's only if I want cosmetics, which I've never cared that much about. So yeah, for me, it's a free game. For me, it's a free-to-play game that I basically don't have to pay anything for. It's like there's no real hurdles that I have to bypass in any monetary way. So yeah, that's excellent. That's perfect. That's the best kind of game.
Anything else from you guys? Any other guesses? Any other votes?
I mean, I'll repeat myself. It's a stupid category.
I'll agree with
like, really. I mean, at best, it's like at least okay. Then change the award. Which was the worst company in regards to their monetary model?
Well, I think the best one this year has been World of Warcraft Classic.
Fair
Pay
enough.
monthly sub, get the game.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but Guild Wars, you buy the game and then you don't have to spend anymore. That's even less. You
Yeah, and as a result,
the content
it's shut down because they don't have enough money to pay for the development.
Son of a horse. Quantity doesn't equal quality. Gosh darn it.
I feel like if they could go back in time, they would have done it differently, and they wouldn't have had the same problem. Like, I genuinely think that they had, something really good to start with. Like, it's just, again, you're talking about issues made or decisions made during inception that you couldn't possibly know you'd have to deal with 5-6 years later. It's like, that's to me the hardest thing about making an MMO is like, I don't know where this quote comes from, but it's like, you don't just need a developer, you need a psychologist, you need you need someone who like an anthropologist. You need maybe a social scientist. Like, you need these other roles as well, because there's issues that maybe you don't even necessarily see coming, but they're gonna become an issue.
I would actually say that's probably the worst idea, because I feel to some extent that's the kind of people who've actually come up with a bunch of the bad ideas that has been implemented in games, because it's not simplistic, but it's like, oh well, people like colors and opening boxes. Let's make boxes that you open with things in them and sell it to them. It's like, that's a psychologist's like wet dream of human drive. It's like, wow, that's really what the people want. They love gambling. They love gambling. They love drugs. They love alcohol. They love a thing that everyone else also knows. Not gonna mention it. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure those people are actually good to sort of drag in without strongly sort of telling them that they have to do it in a proper way, in a way that, and that's the problem. It's just not natural, and I think that's sort of where the big problem comes in. It's just like you're trying to manipulate people into doing stuff, and that doesn't always go the way that you want it to.
All right, show the article.
Well, didn't we get the answer? That it was... Wait, what topic are we on right now?
Monetization crap.
Well, yeah, before that, when I was talking about the bringing other people in, I was talking about general development, not monetization, because bringing in a psychologist to monetization would only make them make more money. So I would definitely never suggest that largely, because that's against my own best interests.
I think to some extent, even in general design, that if it doesn't come from a sort of natural place of artistic and just wanting to do it, but instead it's your job to make, oh, people should like this. I mean, there's a reason psychologists aren't going around ruling the world. They're not that great at their job, clearly. It's like they're not that great at manipulating people into doing exactly what they want them to do. It's like,
I mean, I couldn't disagree more. I mean, advertising works every single day, most of the day. People are tricked all the time. When you play a game, you're tricked. You're basically, in a way, thinking you have a lot of choice, but you don't actually have that much choice. Like, if you break it down to the physics, to the programming, you don't, in most games, you don't have that much choice. But it's not fun to just do that to every single game and just break it down to the brass tacks and be like, oh, well, I can't go here because there's a barrier here, so like this game sucks. But at the same time, it very much, like a majority of games are trying to push you in a direction.
Yeah, but who loves commercials? And buying things from commercials. I mean, it's not exactly like, it's not something we yell from the tops of the mountains like, oh, commercial companies, you've saved my life. All of. Anyways, I think we're going way off track here. Next thing.
The next award is best. They had no consensus.
What did they give you?
They had no consensus. I guess I will read a couple of their options here. So we had ESO, which, by the way, has every single model combined into one game. I just wanted to get that out there. We had Dauntless, which I think is a fair game. I think it's just you pay for it, right? It's free, and then you pay like some kind of premium thing. Typical. Warframe is on here as well. Andy McAdams says. Ben Griggs says Elder Scrolls as well. Another Guild Wars 2 vote. Brendan said RuneScape or WoW. Those are good ones. Brianna says Guild Wars 2 again. So lots of Guild Wars 2. I'm seeing an Arcade Unchained from Carlo, which is just hilarious to see. Like, absolutely hilarious to see someone actually say Arcade Unchained in terms of the price. That would get eaten alive if you were on the Arcade forums. Another Elder Scrolls Online from Chris Neal. Colin Henry says the Elder Scrolls Online. Man, like, it is just, it's crazy to me that it seems like for a lot of people, even reporters who report on MMO, developments or news, if the game doesn't force you to buy something, that's kind of enough for some people to like have cognitive dissonance over whether or not it's morally wrong or is taking advantage of you or is kind of really like, take out the moral arguments, take out the soapbox for a second and just say, is it a good value argument? Is this a good use of my funds for the value that I'm getting? I think we've all said and kind of agreed to some extent, Guild Wars 2, whether or not they had problems with their recent templates, still is probably the best here that we've seen out of what everybody is voting. But I'm surprised to see Arcade Unchained a couple of times. I'm surprised about that because here's a game that had to literally refund currency, refund time, take out currency of the game because people were exploiting it. I don't know if that's the best game to say that it has the best business model, man. That's just, yeah, I don't know. Not to mention,
I forgot about the first one.
What?
Selling spaceships. It's a really good one.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I feel like this should have been explained more because do they mean good as in good for the consumer? Because we can make an evil best business model list, which is kind of the worst business model as well. It's the most effective one, but
I think we should do that for fun one time on the podcast when we don't have much. It's just like, okay, today we're going to create the most evil combination of monetization possible. But yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, so with Elder Scrolls, look, you'll never hear me say a positive thing about their business model. And it's just because, simply speaking, whenever they were designing that game, they were like, all right, let's make it a subscription-based game. When the game was clearly flopping and not doing well, they rescued it with Tamriel Unlimited, which basically turned the game into what it is now, which was a very good decision and helped the game tremendously. But what they also did then was change how they monetized it. They made the game free, but have a premium subscription. They gave the game a very Lord of the Rings Online approach where it has a cash shop. You can buy cosmetics. You can buy certain boosts. And then you can also pay for like crafting boosts. You can pay for expansions a la carte, or you can just get access to them by paying for subscription. So there's the illusion essentially that, hey, you don't have to spend money on all of it, but you can just spend money on the things you want. But the problem is that it doesn't work like that because shops don't work in a vacuum unless they just don't affect the player at all, which is not the case, by the way. They do. then it doesn't work like that in a vacuum. And I thought that lemposs made a funny point that if your game, for example, focuses a lot on cosmetics, then technically speaking, having cosmetics in your game is kind of still pay to win. And I think that that's actually a good point. I mean, like, if you can't make a certain armor set and the point of your game is looking cool, then, I mean, isn't it kind of pay to win to have to buy a costume? Like, I've never heard that argument before, but I think there's an argument to be made there. So that's why I shit on ESO's business model a lot, is like, my problems with the game aside, having loot boxes. Remember I said it's got the Thanos gauntlet, it's got the loot box, it's got the subscription, it's got the buy to play price, the box price I should say, B2P. It's got the box price. What else am I missing here? Cash shop, right? And then it's also got we already said loot boxes. We are cash shop. I'll let be XP boosts and different things like that. There's one more thing. Oh, expansions. Boom. 5 different things you can buy in that game. That's just crazy to me. 5 different models, essentially. It's like, you know, whenever Oprah is saying, like, you can have a car, you can, it's like, you can get monetized, like, everybody's getting monetized. So it's, maybe it is the best business model, because it's making a lot of money. That's for damn sure. But I don't think that's what they meant by it.
Trailers. That trailers are great.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that much.
That's where that money is going, I guess. Well, and they have to keep popping out expansions.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. MMO's biggest blunder. The biggest MMO blunder. Interesting. Huh. I think we're going to get an interesting variety of answers here. I will start off so I can rest my voice after this. The biggest MMO blunder for me is just going to be easy. It's going to be the handling of WoW Classic's launch. I think was a pretty big MMO blunder. Might be one of the biggest. And then my second answer, my coming in second answer, it goes back to Guild Wars 2. Just the handling of Guild Wars 2. I think that if they had handled it better, they wouldn't have, unfortunately, had to make as big drastic cuts as they did. So anyway, those are my 2 answers. What do you guys got?
Well, I was going to say that point, so thanks for stealing it. I guess loot boxes, I don't know. I don't actually know of that many blunders this year, besides like poor releases.
Got nothing.
I mean, the 2 that jump to mind for me is Arc-Age Unchained, or whatever the frick the name of it was now. I already forgot. Shows you how well it stuck in my mind. But just the way that was handled, just from the beginning on, as soon as we started to notice with the name reservation services, and I talked to you about it as well, nerdSlayer, just the things that I saw in it and the things, my predictions, which I think mostly were relatively on point in that regard. It was just very poorly handled, and clearly they needed more time and should have had a bit bigger dream for that. And they could have gotten something out of it, and now they've just, well, very much ruined it. And well, the ongoing story for me is going to be how Evil Line is being handled as of late, and that's really only gone worse this year. So, well done, CCP and Pearl Abyss. At this rate, I'm going to give you 2 more years.
All right. Do you want to hear what they've got?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
The winner was the Blizzard, or I almost said the Blitzard. The Blizzard Blitzchung fiasco. The Blitzer Blitzchung. Yeah, but you guys get my point.
That's not
How
an
is it even
MMO.
MMO related?
I don't know. They said the Blizzard Blitzchung fiasco was the winner.
It's Hearthstone. That's not That's not an MMO. I get it's Blizzard, but it's has nothing to do with a damn MMO.
I mean, if we're going to go that direction, I'm sure there's some developer who's like killed kids or something. Let's go with that instead. If they have any relationship to gaming, I guess it counts as MMOs.
Hearthstone is a WoW spinoff.
I mean, there is cross-reference. Okay, fair enough.
Well, last year the blunder was awarded to Diablo Immortal, so I guess it's been consistently not about MMOs.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
It seems to be a bit of a common theme with these awards.
Yeah. The next one is.
To be fair, there's. Nope,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Nope. Go ahead.
Well, you're gonna make your joke. I was gonna let you finish it, and then I was gonna go on to the next one.
Okay, fine. I'll make my. Well, there's not that many MMOs around any longer, so there's not a whole lot of awards to give out. There we go.
There
Laugh.
you go.
Aha. Funny.
I'm glad. Now moving on to the next one. Best MMO player housing.
Wait, what?
The best MMO player housing. So if we're going with current MMOs, which I guess I could say, maybe I'll have two answers. Current MMOs, I would say, well, Minecraft is technically an MMO on some of their servers, so is that my answer? Is that cheating or?
I was about to say that.
That's not an MMO only. That's whatever people set it up to be.
All right, if it's my old answer, it has to be Galaxies. You guys knew that already. There's no factual evidence to state it's any other game, just based off of sheer options for customization. They have.
Rift?
You're voting Rift?
Sure, it's the only game that I ever really got into housing, so like that counts, I guess. And Rift is still around, I think. I'm not actually sure.
I mean, I guess my spaceships count as houses. I mean, some of them, especially those luxury ones, they got some really nice apartments in there. And well, depending on where you park it, you got some great views. But yeah. The only game I've really played where you could customize a house has been SWTOR, and I have not played that this year. So, and even then, those were kind of crap.
SWTOR have housing?
Yeah.
Like when we say housing, do we mean just a place that is sort of instanced for you?
That's what they mean by it.
Oh, okay.
Because they voted Elder Scrolls Online, so.
Yeah, that's like what I expected the award to be.
I don't think I've ever actually seen the housing in that. Can you decorate?
Yeah, you can. Huh. You can put all sorts of statues and other crap in there. Like, there are people that spend really, really big real life and in-game money in SWTOR on their housing.
Hey man, I spent all my money in Rift on housing because it was the only money thing that really existed. I was like, I guess I'll do this. I made a cool house.
No, I prefer to put it in my outfits. Like I always said in SWTOR, I was walking around in outfits that cost more than most people's their houses.
I took off ads just for the lulz to see what would come up. And do you guys see what ads I got?
Yeah, Black Desert.
For fuck's sake. Actually, come to think of it, do any other MMOs really advertise?
Elder Scrolls Online does when they have expansions.
True.
Not a whole lot of other ones though. Oh, Final Fantasy as well when they have expansions.
Holy heck, that is a lot of freaking ads. 1, 2, 3, 4 on 4 different places. Oh my lord. They really want you to play Black Desert.
Well, I didn't even notice the top and the side. Oh my god. I didn't know there was like 4. I just noticed the 2 side ones.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yo, we should play Black Desert Online, guys.
5, 6.
I just want to say, I was looking at that article. The guy named Brendan. If you scroll down, NS, he says in that article, he says No Man's Sky. He says if we're considering No Man's Sky to be an MMO, so he actually thought for a second, is this an MMO? For once, one of these writers.
Are you trying to trigger me, dude?
Let's move on. Quickly now. What's the next one?
You've already had your rant. You don't get 2 rants on the same topic.
I'm waking up though, dude. I'm about to fire another one off.
Oh, for fudge's sake.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't have much to say about the player housing because, like Yo Soy Tai said in chat, not a lot of MMOs actually have player housing anyway. So
No, wait, hold on. We completely forgot Arcage. They have massive housing. They actually have open world housing.
okay, Arcage for me wins then.
I was about to say, I just remembered that. It's like, holy heck, that game is about freaking housing. It's like, that should clearly win that award.
Yep.
We have a winner.
We've got a winner. Congrats. All right. Now we can move on and not feel a lack of closure. The not so massively game of the year. Okay, let's kick off with that one. I'm not interested.
End up. I want me.
Shut up.
The biggest MMO surprise. You want to do this one?
No, we're doing which one isn't the which one isn't massive, aren't we?
No, we are not.
Oh, come on, it's all of them.
Good one. The biggest MMO surprise.
You cannot tell them.
Biggest MMO surprise.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta keep it a secret.
That Arcage released in a non-terrible monetization model. Oh.
Too late, damn it. You guys saw it already. Well, I don't know if the guys in chat chat me with me right now, and Comms saw it. Did you guys see it as well?
Nope.
See?
No.
Saw what?
Oh no, I thought I showed you guys what the answer was on accident, but anyway.
I probably read it and already forgot it.
Biggest MMO surprise for me, it's probably going to be maybe announcement of a new Lord of the Rings MMO. That was pretty big news for me. Like, obviously there's no details about it, but just like hearing that they're doing another one, and Amazon, or I think it's Amazon, has the rights to do that TV show that's like $1 billion TV show. That was pretty crazy for me. I would say that was one of my big surprises. Just to keep it easy, I'll say a couple more. Like, let's just do 3. Another big surprise was definitely the rise of the classic servers was kind of a big MMO surprise. Maybe not for me personally, but I think that was a big surprise, period. It's been news all year. What other things have been a big surprise? I was surprised whenever they announced all those new MMO mobile MMOs. I almost said MMOs, but I was like, I'm not even gonna try and attempt that because people were trolling me with that on my mobile MMO video. They kept saying, "Well, now we've got the MMO genre," and I was like, "Please, don't do that to me. If that becomes a thing, it's gonna suck to say. It's gonna be like a tongue twister every time."
Triple MO.
Triple MO. Oh yeah, that's probably what it'll eventually become. But
Triple A, triple MO.
This is a AAA, triple MO RPG
experience, open world,
sandbox.
All right, I'm done with mine. I don't even have a third. I don't think. I'll just go with my first 2. Who's next?
I just don't really think that I have anything that's really surprised or shocked me, or that I feel should be a surprise or a shock. It seems like the market is going into relatively predictable patterns, and it's a little bit sad actually, but that's how I see it right now.
Well,
I'm waiting for this big explosion of like, oh my fucking god.
I mean, it's not like they are exactly dropping like hot bombs on us suddenly. It's like, hey guys, here's a $500 million MMO that we made in total secret. It's like the market is not exactly just like fast. It's like just shocking us with these things. Sort of in general, I think the biggest surprise is like in a long time was something like Apex, just because that just came out of freaking nowhere because EA supposedly freaking hate their developer. and they just never advertised their game. And it's like, why are you not successful, guys?
Hytale not releasing this year was a big surprise, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You looked at the trailer and it looked like there was a lot of things that were already fleshed out and ready to be, it looked like it was ready to release. I think they were ready to release. I just think what they said is that they had so much hype, so much like view count on the YouTube video that they want us to.
Oh wow, that's scheduled for 2021.
Yeah, they pushed it ahead, I think, because they kind of realized that they had something special, like even more special than they kind of realized initially, after they had so much positive reception for it.
That's still like a 2-year push. That's quite crazy.
Yeah, I think so too.
What release first, Hytale or Star Citizen? That's gonna be interesting to watch.
For sure.
I shall maintain a lordly silence.
Got better.
All right, it's
What was their answer?
revival of City of Heroes, which I think is a pretty good one. It was definitely a surprise. I wouldn't say it was my biggest, probably just because like I know a lot of servers like that exist. You know, these like quiet little rogue servers that have a little bit of code, maybe, whatever, like they're emulating, like they exist. I know they exist, and I've played on small ones before, which don't get a lot of hoopla, like Vanguard. Saga of Heroes has one. I've talked about Wild Stars. What's another smaller scale one? Oh, Chronicles of Spellborn just came out with one of their private servers that's been doing pretty well. So I've known that these quieter, like less played, less hyped up ones have existed, but still the revival of City of Heroes definitely was surprising for me, just because I was surprised that NCSoft hasn't cease and desisted their asses, to be honest. That's the part that I'm surprised about.
Well, they did a good job of keeping it secret, didn't they?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean after it was revealed? Yeah, that's true. I was kind of surprised that there was that much interest in City of Heroes, but granted, I never played the game and never really had heard about it, so I didn't know how popular it was. But suddenly people found a place where they could play it, supposedly. Which I don't know why, but I have a certain thought that it's like people like jumped on it, played it for like maybe a week, and then just left again.
All right, let's move on. Got a couple more here. All right, this one is the worst MMO business model. And oh crap, okay, I'm not going to scroll down. I keep forgetting not to scroll down right there. They put the answer like so up high, dude. It's like right when you scroll down, you see the answer, so.
Those monsters not making an entire article that you have to scroll through to find the answer. Monsters.
I don't care. The moment you clicked on the article, they got their ad revenue. The rest, it doesn't matter.
True. But all right, let's answer the question. Worst MMO business model. You guys go.
I mean, I think you already answered it. It was ESO. It's like that is just insane how much you can buy in that game. It's like it feels like it's not an MMO. It's like it's a massive multiplayer game, but it's only massive because you need to freaking buy so many different things to put all together into a single multiplayer game.
You say all the things about ESO, but I feel like BDO might even tops ESO in terms of the amount of stuff you have to pay, like per month.
I think there's more to buy in ESO, but I think it's more required to buy things in BDO, I think.
Yeah.
I think I got the double nomination for this one.
Oh, actually, I have one.
Number one, it's going to be Wargaming and their World of Warships side and their Puerto Rico event. It's like, yeah, we're everywhere. We're going to give, you can earn this free tier 10 premium in-game, yada, yada, yada. And then people just did the math on it. I was like, unless you can like have all the flags, all the boosters, and all the stuff, which partly you can of course buy. Then you can buy the boosters, which cost like, I don't know, an obscene amount, like 100 euros or something. I don't know. You can buy some boosters to get it done, and then you need to do this and you need that. You pretty much need no life, and then you can get the ship. Or you can pay 250 euros and get the ship in one go. And then the best thing is, if you spend money on boosters to help unlock the ship faster, if you don't get enough points by the end of the event, it's all gone. Literally everything you put in there is all completely gone, unless you decide to spend even more money to unlock it afterwards anyway. It's like, I can't think of a more shitty way to monetize a Christmas event than they have done this year. Like, it's really, really fucked up and terrible. And the way they've been handling it is, of course, typical business way, because they know if we stop talking about it, people will stop talking about it and they'll forget about it. But it was really, really disgraceful, and especially the way how they tried to defend it, and like they were putting spouts, oh yeah, like this is how it's really going to be, which was just another misguided ad for their selling the damn boosters. So they were really just trying to gaslight the player base and that, and people were not too happy with them. So yeah, that was a really, really bad way of monetization. And the other way is, well, hello, my old favorite friend EVE Online and their gambling introduction, which like, here, have gambling. You need to pay to put something up on the gambling thing. And if it doesn't sell, then you lose what you paid in it. And also if it sells, you still lose what you paid into it, but we're also going to take another cut of it. And if you participate in it from the other end, it's like the odds are like 5 or 10 times worse than the average casino game. It's like, oh man. Like, they banned third-party sites, that did gambling around EVE Online, which used to be really, really big. In fact, I linked some machinimas on the Discord, which were on a channel that was literally called EOH Poker, because you could play poker with in-game money, which was really big. So, yeah, it was like people ran that stuff, and then they were like, yeah, we don't want that because yada, 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 and now they're putting it in themselves. So those are two ones that I think are really bad, and not just like, they're not really general business models, but more specific examples within a business model.
I'm gonna say Star Citizen, just to be evil.
Oh, you don't have to be evil. It's already on the website.
Yeah, it's Star Citizen.
Wait, it is?
Yeah, it is.
You just spoiled it for him. Wow.
I'm evil. You should know that.
Man, I'm a prophet. I can see the future.
Yeah, it was Star Citizen and Fallout 76, actually, which, we'll pretend the Fallout 76 isn't really there, because obviously it doesn't really qualify under our definition, which I'm going to put a fucking emote in chat where someone can hit it, and it'll just say, like, the auto dialogue thing, so I won't have to say it anymore, and you guys will be happier because of it.
I mean, to be honest, right?
That's going to be one long stream of just saying it's not an MMO, it's not an MMO, it's not an MMO, it's not an MMO, it's not massive, it's not massive, it's not massive.
Star Citizen is not an MMO right now. The server cap is 50 people.
Oh, sheesh.
There you go.
Wow, they're lying.
The true
they're
bomb.
lying.
It's like they are still working on the underlying technology to make more people work. It's like right now the server cap is still 50 people per server, and it has been since the beginning, I think, of the PU.
That actually sounds kind of terrifying. It's like that they can't push it beyond that.
Oh, they can. They're just working on it
to improve that. It sounds like. Oh.
They have like technology internally working, so they can get more stuff, but it's just not ready yet. But yeah, technically, as it stands right now, it would not be an MMO under our definition.
Well, I'm just sort of kind of thinking, because like something like Camelot Unchained is still in alpha, and it can have like several thousand people in the same place.
Yeah,
it's like, what the heck are you doing, Star Citizen?
Well, space games and fidelities and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot more going on.
Next topic.
I thought it was interesting that Andy McAdams said SWTOR, but then said that ESO had one of the best business models when they basically have the same business model. Hilariously enough, like if you look at what's in the games, they're both very similar. In fact, they might be honestly one-to-one copies. SWTOR has loot boxes. SWTOR has expansions you can buy. SWTOR has subscription you pay. SWTOR, I think actually recently though, didn't it go free to play and it allows you to actually play up to Shadow of Revan or some shit like that. I think they've changed some of their business model. So if anything, SWTOR should be better than ESO as a business model. So it's that's why it's so annoying when you don't have standards, because it's just like it seems like a contradiction.
Are we sure it's not the same company? Or to say it's like one guy who went from SWTOR over to Cinema. Actually, it's like, yo guys, I got the freaking ideas for selling people stuff. Wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, it wouldn't, but it's because, and I've talked about it before in my microtransactions video, they learned it from the East, you know? They learned, like, the one thing that the West did, I would say, that was pretty surprising for the East from what I've seen, is things like the Game Pass. Game Passes and things like Battle Passes, and I don't know what they call it in Fortnite. Is it Battle Pass? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, I think it's Battle Pass.
Yeah.
The West has innovated in that sense, monetarily speaking, but most of the innovations come from the East. You know, gacha games, loot boxes, all that sort of stuff comes from the East. So I don't know. I just think we learned from the best, but we took it to an extreme for sure. Because I would even argue some of our games are more pay to win than some Korean games. And I think that's just because of the way that our markets function. They're different, you know. Like, for example, they get benefits from playing a certain game in the cafe, the PC cafe, versus, like, you know, I don't know of anything like that where I'm at, where I can go to some cafe and get like a bonus, like, I don't know, vanity item or whatever else. So like things just work differently over there. But point being, their money makers still work over here. They just don't work as effectively.
Well, I mean, we do have, it's like there has been sponsored deals for games before where it's like buy this product or buy from this store even, I think has been done a couple of times and you get something in game. Like, so there's somewhat of a similar thing, but yeah, I never heard about playing in a specific place giving you special benefits. That just sounds weird, but...
All right, we can move on. I didn't have much else to say. I just think you start to see kind of, even with my most recent mobile MMO video, that a lot of these trends, man, they come from their ability to make money. And that's why it's like when the industry is so young, like the MMO industry for me is still very young. It's frankly speaking just about as old as the hilariously speaking the MMA industry. MMA is actually not very old either. Well, collectively it's old as shit, but like in terms of its rise to commercial viability through like different shows and events and stuff like that, it's pretty young, like officially as a sport. As a competition, if you will. So I think it's kind of interesting that they both share a lot of the same problems, and that the first to get there sometimes can take a lot of the spoils just because there's no other competition. Because the truth of the matter is, a game like ESO wouldn't be able to function if players, for example, had access to doing their own version of the game, right? That wouldn't really function. It also wouldn't function if they had an alternative, period. Maybe another Elder Scrolls game. Or if they had an alternative MMO, just period, right? That was maybe equivalent in some ways. That didn't have the same kind of monetization. I think a lot of the current monetization problems just simply come from there's not a whole lot of choices. And the games that do exist currently are run by big, giant publishers, which means they're trying to make money. So don't be surprised, I guess.
You know, all I think that we can learn from this is that things that have two M's in it as is just bad. It's like it's doomed. It's like We need to get rid of them. We need completely new terminology and start a clean slate. Need some new letters to ensure ourselves from corruption and monetization.
All right, to go into the next one. And also, thank you, Alundris, for the subscription, the Twitch Prime subscription. It's been 6 months currently. That means 6-month streak. So congrats on that, and also welcome back to the Nor Club. All right. The next one is Most Improved MMORPG. And, this one's going to be juicy. The Most Improved MMORPG. So, again, just to state, I'm not really taking any of these super seriously, so I'm not defining MMO by the, in my opinion, actual definition here. I'm just going to use their definition, which is whatever you want it to be. Whatever they want it to be. Whatever they call an MMORPG, I'll consider an MMORPG just for the discussion right now. I'm going to say that for me personally, the most improved MMORPG, man, that's a hard answer. That's a hard question to answer. I'd have to say, just looking from the outside, I can do an approach like that. I'll say that what I've noticed to be the most improved MMORPG, by, again, massively overpowered standards of what an MMORPG is, I think it's actually fair to say that ESO and Final Fantasy XIV have done pretty well in that regard. Because they started with basically catastrophic failures and managed to come back from them. So I know that's not as relevant in 2019, but considering they're still making said comebacks and, well, not comeback anymore, they're on top. They're games that are on top. I think that's probably what I will vote, but that's just because I really don't know what else to vote, because I'm not, like, if I'm just going to look at it from the perspective of games I haven't played or involved in myself, they constantly describe Path of Exile as an MMORPG, so by their own logic, Path of Exile probably would win this contest. But if we're going to talk about current MMOs in the space, I would say the fact that ESO and Final Fantasy XIV are still on top and are making, as big waves as they are, I think that's probably my vote. But, yeah. What do you guys think?
World of Warcraft. They released a classic, which is the better game than what is currently running. I'm actually gonna say ArcAge, just because they released just a better game that wasn't monetized like crazy and basically made the old game unplayable unless you threw all the money at it. So yeah, I would say ArcAge.
Yeah, I'll also go with ArcAge.
If I have to choose from what I've played, I guess ArcAge as well, but because I don't to me, and I know a lot of people disagree, it's I don't really think that WoW Classic is all that great, but so I don't really see that as an improvement.
Right, well, drum roll, but the winner is Black Desert. Woo!
Son of a whore. That makes me. Oh.
What have Black Desert even made this year?
Was the remaster this year, or was that last year? It was last year. It was the end of last year, I think.
All right.
So it wasn't
End
that.
of last year. That can count. They don't do
that. Someone's got paid right there. I know for sure.
So they pushed the game to 3 new platforms in the span of a couple of months.
Here, I'm going to turn off ads again just to see the ads pop up as I'm looking at the award, just for the hilarity of it all. Oh, that's peak MMO journalism right there. I'm sorry, Massively. I love you guys sometimes, but this is just too good to pass up, man. Somebody clip that shit.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even.
I
know
don't
if,
think there's
if the people. I don't even know because the journalists usually don't control the ads, do they?
No, they do. I mean, this is a community-owned website, so.
Oh.
They're
snap.
they're getting ad deals because they're getting money for it because they need to run their website, but they also have a Patreon. And so like where it's complicated for me is like the reason why I don't just take ad money and just do a bunch of ad videos is because I made a promise to myself, but also to you guys, that I wasn't going to just be another fucking pocket. Like I didn't want to be influenced in somebody else's pocket, right? Like I didn't want to just feel like, oh, I'm going to make a video, but I can't actually say how I feel. I can't actually, explain my perspective. And I'm a horrible pretender. Like I'm not really good at pretending things. Like when I don't like something, I have a hard time pretending I do. So I never wanted to put myself in that position where I'm trying to like advertise something because I need to, make money. And then I'm in this position where I feel like I'm, next thing you know, I'm shilling Black Desert just because I want to make money off of it. Whereas for me, what?
I was just about to say that if Black Desert Online commercials start rolling before your videos, I'm gonna have some questions.
Well, the problem is I can't choose my ads. So like on YouTube,
I think what he means is he
can't you
ad
actually
reads.
you can choose to not have certain ads. Isn't that a YouTube setting?
I mean,
Yeah, there
I
are
think
some settings, I believe.
Yeah, you can make it to where you can choose which ads you want yourself through like a limited pool. And I think what that means is it allows you to like not advertise, for example, to like kids or different things like that. But I don't think you can actually pick
parties.
Yeah, I don't think you can actually pick what you advertise, but I don't know, I'll have to check again. But last time I checked, pretty much to get the maximum amount of ad revenue, you just let them, suggest whatever ads the algorithm essentially comes up with, and people want to put ad space on, your video.
Yeah, and I like that for different products.
As the ex-BDO player here, I guess. From when I quit, after when I quit from 2019, I would say, like, the combat has gotten worse. It's gotten more pay to win. They've made it more grindy, and it just keep increasing vertical progression, so it's just more grind. It also pretty much destroyed a lot of the player-made group content that there was with world bosses, because you can't PvP there anymore. Then servers are still crap, and people don't PvP anymore because there's no point. And it's just gone downhill. But I still don't understand that like at all as to how that's improved.
I think it might be an outside perspective, because it seems like Black Desert Online sort of has just this weird effect that's like people are somehow attracted to it, and it's like because it's like it seems to keep popping up.
It operates a niche. Like
that might just be because of the advertisement. I'm not entirely sure how to gauge popularity on the internet.
Well, they do advertise. I can tell you because I research a lot. They advertise more than just about any other MMO I've seen in the past year or two. Like they advertise even more than Blizzard does.
I guess it works for them.
Blizzard doesn't advertise, at least not that classic.
No, not at all. And that's what I mean. It's like you don't see classic advertisement ads. You saw like the couple of ads they did, which did really well, but you see a slew of ads from Black Desert. Like everywhere you go, you can find ads for them.
But well, didn't Blizzard like advertise after the launch? I was like,
Yep.
"Yo, guys, come play Classic." It was like,
yeah, it was the week of.
Couldn't you have done this prior to launch? That seems really weird.
Because they were rushed, is what I think.
Yeah.
I think they were rushed, so they like put it out when it was ready, kind of thing, instead of putting it out on time, because their shareholders just said launch it at this point, regardless of whatever problems they had, which happens a lot. But yeah,
How do you rush a 15-year-old game? It just seems weird.
They had to do quite a bit of rework because they put the entirety of Classic on the modern, I guess just current version of their engine and their backend and everything. So that required quite a few tweaks and bits because, of course, things work differently, play differently. So I can see that it would be actually a reasonably involved project.
All right, let's move on, right?
Yes.
All right. Next one and final one is the best MMORPG expansion. I'll admit I'm probably gonna be horrible for this because a lot of the time I don't buy expansions. Like I'm super picky when it comes to what I buy. When it comes to like content, like I don't just buy every DLC. In fact, I might hear in this chat right now, even though I've definitely played a lot of MMOs, especially comparatively, I might have maybe bought the least amount of DLC out of you guys. I don't know. I've maybe bought DLC Lord of the Rings online.
There are also free expansions.
That's all I could really think of. I feel like a lot of the time I don't really buy the content. I unless I'm playing a sub game, you don't really have to buy them in every sub game. Some once you pay the sub, it comes with it. But the last expansion specifically I bought was probably Shadowbringers in Final Fantasy XIV, and before that, it would have had to be. I don't even know if I can remember. It's a long ass time, so I guess I'll just say, based on reception, based on sales, based on population response, and based on the talk about it, I think Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers kind of is my only option, basically, because it's the only expansion I've bought recently. So I'll go with that. But do you guys have anything?
Path of Fire for Guild Wars 2, which came out in 2017. Actually, I did actually buy, I think 2 of the Living Stories, because the Living Stories do cost gems. I think it's if they release one and then you don't play the game throughout that entire release of that Living Story, and then they go on to the next one, you're required to buy it. So I had to buy 2. So actually, those are the last 2 I've bought, which were, I can't remember what they're called, but one of them actually, nerdSlayer, you know the place in like it was an old Guild War 1 zone up in the Char territory, the forest one.
Oh, okay.
They've remade that one, which
That's
is quite
cool.
beautiful. And the other one was in Silver Pine Peaks. No, not Silver Pine Peaks. Up north of the Nords.
Where you used to go do the monk grinds in Guild Wars 1?
No, I don't think this is an old zone. This is
Okay.
like sort of a new concept. No, actually, no. No, it was an outpost.
You sure it wasn't an Eye of the North?
Well, it wasn't Eye of the North because it's up north. I just can't remember what it is. Like, it was an outpost zone in Guild Wars 1, if I remember correctly.
Because
Like,
it sounds familiar, dude. Like the name,
Yeah.
it's messing with my head.
You should come play Guild Wars 2 and remember Guild Wars 1.
The only
That's one
reason
heck
why
of
I'm
an
not playing it
advertisement.
is because I got to finish this review. I'm just one of those people where I can't have my brain power split too many ways, because otherwise you just get a lesser version of me. And so like I need to focus on finishing the review first, and then once I finish it, then we can figure out when we're gonna drop in Guild Wars 2 or ESO. I haven't 100% decided, but I'm leaning towards Guild Wars 2 just because I know I'm gonna like it more. But
It's in the Far Shiver Peaks, and it's the Icebrood Saga, which is actually that's the name of the entire new living. Bound by Blood.
Carter.
Rothmar Valley.
I think the only... Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. If it requires me to buy DLC, that means it's a theme park, and I don't like theme parks.
Enough.
I mean, I don't think it should be buy only. I mean, expansions can be released for free. I mean, EVE does it all the time.
Is that actually expansions? Isn't that just patches?
No, they call them expansions.
Yeah, okay, sure.
And they add a lot of stuff in there.
And
like
SWOTOR called Onslaught an expansion. Am I right, guys?
Yeah, okay, but like Eve actually adds content with their expansions, so there is
So
something
does
to be said for them.
expansions.
Well, it's like I haven't bought any expansions, and I think the only like noticeable increase that I would say, like, oh wow, this has actually got me interested in playing a game again, is ironically is patch 3.8 for Star Citizen, because as much as I like the game, I have not played it like more than maybe an hour per patch since like patch 2.6 or something. So there's like a couple of years ago now. But beyond that, it's like I've got ArcAge, I played WoW's BFA, and I don't think that would be a best expansion in anybody's sane mind. And if they say that's the best expansion, then I'm seriously going to question their judgment.
Hey man, might be exactly what they like.
That's what I'm saying. If they like that, I'm going to seriously question their judgment.
Mm.
Well, come on. Stop teasing us. Tell us.
Their answer was Shadowbringers. I feel like it was either between that and Elsewhere, and sure enough, it was between that and Elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically split, but primarily people said Shadowbringers.
And somebody mentioned No Man's Sky again, because,
Out of those two, I would probably say Elsewhere. But I'm also really biased in that regard because I love Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the thing that I'm
Also-
looking forward to the most with Elsewhere is just simply that they got the Necromancer class now. So I'm glad that I have a class that I enjoy. I actually seem to enjoy, but I'm not optimistic that I'm going to enjoy the combat, because the combat's still the same system. It's still the same engine. At least in Guild Wars 2, with the changes that have happened and like all the different like subclasses and new content basically that's changed the customization of the game. I'm not going to say it's Guild Wars 1 yet, but it's definitely a lot more complex than it was when I played the game. And it's not as meta-starved. I think it was meta-starved as hell whenever I was playing the game. I think that alone makes me more excited to play Guild Wars 2, just because I know at least I'm going to like the combat. Like at least the combat will be fun.
Yeah. They also added action camera, so you can just you don't need to hold down your mouse or anything to move it. You can just move your direction and what you're looking at with your mouse, which is actually quite fun to play with, depending on the class. It's still not action combat. I should say that.
Hey, I'm excited. I don't have any more rewards to react to. I feel like or awards to react to. I think we got the majority of the big ones. None of them were too insane. I think the main thing, if you guys are wondering if it seems like I'm just being overly critical, I don't really care if people have a different opinion than mine. It's more that when you are making awards and you're kind of like the de facto MMO website, I feel like you should do a better job of at least explaining your awards, because then maybe people like us won't have like a lot of confusion as to what you mean by certain things. But then at the same time, you have a lot more influence than you realize, I guess, is also what I'm trying to say. And when we can look and examine things and start to wonder, like, how influenced by Black Desert Online or Pearl Abyss are you guys? Because I don't hear a lot of the negative stuff mentioned, and I'm seeing these ads all over my screen, and I'm just wondering, like, I don't know everything. I don't claim to know all the answers, but I'm just wondering, does this have anything to do with that? Probably does, but we'll move on to one of the last things that I wanted to get to.
One last thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Put the nail in the coffin.
Oh, son of a... what was I was going to say? Oh, yeah, if they actually started explaining these awards and what it's like, how they sort of judge them, I'm fairly sure that would basically collapse the entire award itself. It's like, this makes no sense whatsoever. It's like, because, like, as we've pointed out in almost all of them, it's like, either there's just no game that you can give the award to, or it's not an MMO, or it's kind of just a really... I mean, especially like the monetization one. It's like, which one is the worst one? It's like, it's not like they come out with like monetizations like on the monthly basis. It's like they throw them out once in a while, and it's like the worst one is still the one it was last year, unless something new actually came along. Yeah, that was the ending words.
Okay, I was going to say, so new games to the future. Hopefully better awards as well.
We should do our own awards.
We should. In fact, we will. I just need to figure out when would be the best time to do them. I need to think about that more. Maybe, can you write that down, Card, so I don't forget?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, do it, assistant.
More like a brain of the operation.
What does that make me? The mouth?
Yeah, I mean, you're the highest ranked talker on the forum or on the Discord.
I guess that's true.
So one last thing I wanted to talk about, because we've talked about it a little bit before, is Phantasy Star Online 2. Finally, we got a trailer. They've said that they're debuting in spring 2020. Currently, right now, you can register for the closed beta. I don't know if it's currently ongoing right now, but the reason why I've been talking about Phantasy Star Online is first, I really enjoyed the first one. Didn't get the chance to play the second one because it was kind of stuck over there across the seas. And so now that they're launching in the West, it's our Western chance to try out the game. And it is definitely older, but I mean, are we really going to complain about that when we just got done playing Classic WoW? A thing that I like about Phantasy Star, comparatively speaking, is that it's a game that doesn't pretend to be an MMO, and yet it basically accomplishes a lot of the same things. And what I'm trying to say is that because they don't pretend to be an MMO, they have a lot of benefits from that. Their combat system, the engine, the way the game functions, it clearly seems like it's not trying too much to be something that it's not. But on top of that, I think it's because creatively they're not focusing so much of their resources on other things. They can just focus on making that multiplayer experience the best experience. And that's basically what you do. I think it says it in the game. Or say it's free to play. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. Free to play. Where is it? I thought it talked about group content. Let's watch the trailer.
I mean, all I can say is it looks aggressively anime.
Oh, it's definitely more anime than maybe you're necessarily comfortable with. But yeah. I'll say that I think you would enjoy the gameplay loop.
What is the gameplay loop of Phantasy Star? Or Fantasy, whatever it is.
So some people in chat can back me up, but essentially it's you create your character and you start with kind of like basically nothing. The weapons that you choose and the class that you choose depends on how you end up playing the game, like combat-wise and customization-wise. And you can kind of change in some ways. You're not necessarily stuck into what you're playing. I don't think they had a class system per se, but it was similar to a class system. And essentially it plays a lot like Diablo, which is just like you go around, you group up with other people in a dome, a social hub of sorts, where you're all kind of running around together. I mean, basically just like Final Fantasy XIV or ESO. The difference is it's not saying it's got 17 other zones. It's just one zone that you're in. That's the community zone. And then you talk to people there. Then you go and do adventures, group content, quests, story missions, raids. I think even PvP in some cases as well. And that's what you go and do on that other time. So it's kind of like, the best way to put it is it's a lobby MMO, which is, you know, the multiplayer online RPG. It's kind of what I've been talking about for a long time. So that's why I'm eager to play it, because I think it will be another thing to, just like Final Fantasy XIV is and will continue to be for me, as I can do that review as well, because that's still planned by the end of the year. Well, not this year, obviously, next year. But prove to you guys that me using the it's not an MMO argument is not to shit on a game. It's to say, like, actually, if you just made it like Phantasy Star and not tried to make it an MMO, maybe you'd have some of the benefits of it. So let's watch some of the gameplay if you're curious.
I guess that is actually a good point, that if you don't focus on being an MMO, you sort of you don't have to follow the sort of trends that MMOs tend to try and do. Oh boy, that is aggressively anime. Oh my lord.
This is an old video, so like the visuals here, obviously, they're not looking as good as they should. It lets me go higher. Let's try going higher.
4K down. YouTube then downgraded to 720 Twitch.
Well, the funny thing is that 4K on YouTube isn't even 4K anyway.
That looks a lot
No.
like Final Fantasy 13.
It downscales and shit. So when people upload 4K, usually they're uploading like 4K to downscaled.
Upscale.
Yeah, basically.
They actually tend to like upload a 4K that was like downscaled or 1080p upscaled to 4K, so they can make use of the high bitrate.
So I might be playing this pony-looking character. Because I'd love to kill some... Okay, it's a summoner. I was going to say I'd love to kill somebody dressed like a pony. That'd be hilarious. So the classes so far look like they're Hunter, Ranger, Force, Braver, Bouncer, Summoner. Obviously, some of these names are translated, so they might not make sense. I'm trying to remember exactly. Ranger's just you use guns. I remember that. Hunter, big swords. Force was, I believe, you're a magic user, like spells. The Summoner, I mean, kind of goes without saying. The Bouncer, I believe, is a monk, but I'm not sure. And the Braver might actually be the Archer, which is confusing because they have a class called Hunter.
I mean, unlike lemposs, I don't mind the anime art style, so I just hope it's good.
But people who like BFA are bad people. No, you sir, good sir. I will not tolerate that kind of hypocrisy.
I told that I questioned their judgment.
I question yours.
Well, you always do because you're made of pure bias.
Ooh, it's also going to have some new content that apparently hasn't been shown yet that's coming from Japan. It's a phantom, a hero, or a specter. I forget the name. Okay. Well, we'll figure it out, I'm sure, soon enough. But here he's just fighting in one of the beginning areas. But this is kind of like the basic gameplay loop of Phantasy Star. It's like you start in these small, easy zones. You can change like your template for what you play, your gear. Depends on how you end up playing the game. Like he has daggers here, which changes the way he attacks and strikes. And then, of course, there's crafting in the game. And it's really just about like loot 'em up, do group content together. To me, it's what a multiplayer online RPG should be about, which is like screw the massive part. Like if you're trying to make a theme park experience, which is what a game like Final Fantasy XIV just is, could you imagine if they could have made Final Fantasy XIV like this? I think it would have been way better. Sorry, maybe you can say I'm crazy. I don't have any evidence for that, but they kind of did try and make Final Fantasy more like this, to be fair, with their big open zones where you can kill monsters in Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. But that game also had innumerable amounts of problems, and guess where those problems came from? Them trying to be massive. Remember they had all these performance issues when they had the 1.0 launch? Imagine if they just said, screw the massive part, period. Let's just do it like Phantasy Star did, which is, by the way, I believe a Japanese game, right? Can someone confirm that? I believe Phantasy Star is yet again another game to add to the list of the Japanese don't play MMOs. They play multiplayer online RPGs. Okay, yeah. There you go. Pyro said it in chat. So another game to prove my theory, right?
Yeah, so it's saying we should we just drop MMOs and start playing multiplayer games instead?
I mean, I think it just depends on what kind of gameplay loop. Like, if you're watching some of this right now, you like running around, talking to your friends, and doing group quests and group things together. Look, there's some type of like casino coins here, some type of gambling.
Yeah, but I need a game that I can preach to people.
You see how you kill monsters and then you go pick up the little items that they drop on the ground. Those little crystals on the ground, those are like little items, and you can sell those, pick them up for the currency that they drop. or sometimes they drop like I was saying, rare items. So to me, it's like the kind of experience where if you've ever played a game and you're just like, man, I just want to run around with my friends and you just do like co-op missions. That's basically what a multiplayer online RPG is. And that's why, like, with games like SWTOR and Final Fantasy XIV, imagine if they let you do your class story with your friends, with your co-op buddies. You know, like imagine if they let you do the leveling experience early on in Final Fantasy XIV with your friends. How could you argue those wouldn't be better experiences?
Couldn't you play story instances with other players in SWTOR?
Technically, yes. You can enable it in the settings, which allows somebody else to join your instance. But when it's only class quests, they're not allowed to talk. They can only hear or read what you're saying. So basically, I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of friends who find it fun to just watch me. You know what I mean? Like, to just only watch me do the quest and kind of help only whenever it comes to the combat part. None of my friends, whenever I played SWTOR, ever really found that very fun. They just wanted to do their story, which I don't blame them, because that's what the game is based, partly on. It's just obviously a shame they didn't have more cooperative content, because I think that could have been a kick-ass part of the game.
I mean, I'm highly entertaining to watch play games, so I have plenty of friends that probably like that. But yeah, actually, one thing that I did note upon that, and to give credit, Elarandris, that's hard to say, also mentions is that it kind of looks like an inferior Monster Hunter, really. It's like, I kind of feel like what I've seen and sort of stuff like that is like, I could just go play Monster Hunter, I feel like, because that game sort of seems to have a bit more quality put into it. Fantasy Star Online might have more quantity, I would guess, is what its big sell might be here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about Monster Hunter because I actually don't think they're necessarily similar, because like this isn't an open world game. It's very much like a theme park. I feel like doesn't Monster Hunter try and have more open world zones and shit like that? You have to explore and find monsters.
I actually think there's a quite sort of segmented.
So you think it's a lot more like this? Zone to zone?
I mean, it kind of, yeah. It kind of looks like it. I have to admit. It's like, granted, you don't go around killing everything in Monster Hunter. I think you mostly just go for the big monsters, of course.
And that's kind of what I also assumed, which makes me think the difference is basically kind of like you were saying, that Phantasy Star is more like an ARPG, and Monster Hunter is more like a
combat game.
Yeah, that, or you would call it a what do you call it when you, I guess, not a collectible game. There's another word for that. I mean, practically it's called Monster Hunter genre at this point, right? Let's just be honest. Like, people usually call that kind of game Monster Hunter kind of game. Like, they don't have I don't know if there's necessarily a term for it, is there?
Should we make up a term?
I mean, we could technically, because, like, why isn't there... I guess you could just say it's Monster Hunter-like.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like Dark Souls, right?
Right.
That's like, a game is like Dark Souls, but Dark Souls itself is not really definable in any way that isn't completely generic to almost any other game that isn't even Dark Souls-like. It's like you run around in the open world, kill stuff, occasional boss, you move on, you finish the game, boom, boom, New Game Plus, done. Oh, and you pick up gear and you level up. That's any and all action-adventure game. So, yeah. And I think that's true for Monster Hunter as well. It's like, I think the most defining thing about Monster Hunter is essentially that you fight a big boss. Oh, it's like big creature, which, yeah, okay. It's the same as a boss. Like, it takes a long time, it has a lot of health, it hits you hard. It's a boss. It's like,
right.
Let's call it what it is. So it's a boss. It's a segmented boss fighting game. There we go.
Well, we will work on the name. The name's a work in progress.
How dare you?
I don't have much to say more about Phantasy Star. Obviously, it's not going to revolutionize the industry. For me, it's just interesting to see another title that really never made it over the seas. Even though the first one was successful enough, you would think at least. Again, perception is a motherfucker. But in this particular case, probably wasn't as popular as we remembered it being. But as a kid, it was like, oh, it's so cool. But there's usually a reason they don't bring something overseas, and it's not because it did really well when you brought it overseas, you know? Like, why wouldn't you bring it again if it did really well? Like, it was probably that I think they tried to do it on Xbox Live, and it was still kind of like new for the time. People weren't really used to playing such a game. So if anything, maybe they were just ahead of their time.
Was the first one also free to play, or was it?
No, it was a buy-to-play game that required a subscription, an Xbox Live membership to play online. So I think that being said, there are some barriers to entry there. Also, it was an older game, so not many people even had Xbox Live back then. Like, not everyone had Xbox Live, is what I'm trying to say. So that was another barrier. Oh, that's right. Pin0 made a good point about how you had to connect online. It was like this weird lobby connect system, even when you were by yourself. I think they've kind of kept that, which, you know, it's interesting. But
so it was always online.
It feels that way. It isn't really, but it feels that way when you're playing on those specific areas. You can run around by yourself, so you technically could play it by yourself, but you wouldn't really play that by yourself. You'd play other content by yourself. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Yeah, see, Pin0 said it could be played offline, so there you go. It's a boss encounter looter. There you go. BEL, a bell. Boss encounter looter. Yeah, we need to work on some terminology. Speaking of which, I got a rough draft today from the work in progress term series that I've been telling you guys about. I finally got a rough draft, so I had the ability to see, sort of, so far at least, what we have in store. And I haven't actually seen all of it yet, only some of it, but it's exciting, finally, to be able to be on the cusp. I feel like we've been on the cusp, but like actually on the cusp, because now I have an actual draft that shows the transitions and how long the episode is and how it's paced and things like that. And I'm excited. I might show you guys a little teaser some other time. I can't show right now because I actually have to download it again on this desktop, and it's a good size file. And for some reason, the transfer service we use slow as hell. Maybe because I'm streaming right now. I don't know. But what else do I have? I don't think I have anything else for you guys, so I'll let you guys go. Thank you for joining me, by the way, for today's
roundtable.
Oh wait, we didn't even do the roundtable question yet. My bad. I was about to say goodbye to you guys already. All right, well, let's do that in like 14 minutes then, if we have time.
Oh, sweet mother. I have a lot to say.
All right, well, you can go. You can go first then.
Okay, I'll go first then. Okay, fine. I'm gonna be really controversial. I'm gonna break down the walls. There should be no raids whatsoever. There, boom. No, I actually think raids should, frankly, split themselves up more with the people that you bring in, because it was a thought that I sort of had. And it's like, right, because like most raids in games have been around those 20 to 40 people. But then I sort of had that thought. It's like, well, there's no other activity we really do in real life where we actually utilize that many people on a single goal. Like, we always split up people whenever you kind of reach around 10. Like, you can sort of think the same thing with sports. Like, I think the biggest sport is the biggest team on a sport is, I think, American football, with like 12 people on the field at one time for one team. Not entirely sure.
Yeah.
So I sort of thought about like trying to split it up so that you don't actually focus the same thing, which, to be fair, MMO already to some extent do that with their mechanics. But I think you could go even further than that and sort of really split people up. Give them 2 goals instead of 1. It's like you need to do 2 things to take down this thing. I think to some extent also to split it, or not to split it up, but also make raids more than just bosses. It's like I think there is something to be said. It's like about constantly fighting things that are 20 times your own size. Like I do feel to some extent you could make raids, or I know it sort of goes in opposition to what raid sort of stands for, but I think scenarios where you also do a bit more than just fighting big bosses. It's like, because like, for example, there have been MMOs where it's like because like raid, it's like you're raiding something, like you're doing a surprise attack on something. It's like, and all it is a chain of corridors between bosses, and sometimes there's like 5 NPCs. It's like, this is the best fortified place in this entire place, and it's like you have 5 guards in between the big dudes. It's like, no, let's do it a bit different. Let's throw 100 dudes at 20 people and see how that works out. That's one of those things that I think would be kind of interesting to watch too, and also just something new to sort of go up against. It's like going up against numbers and sort of trying to control that and make it feel more like a war, because, or not a war, but a battle. This is like, okay, melee, you're up front, securing our backlines, stuff like that. I think would, in my mind, would be somewhat interesting. But it's MMOs, so I think to some extent I'll be very disappointed. So I'm not entirely sure how good an idea that is.
I mean, just like if you talk about splitting up and people doing different roles, I could not help but for me the first thing that jumped to mind was actually PlanetSide 2. When you mentioned, like, if you look at the military unit sizes, like a squad, you're looking 10, 12 people, a platoon around 40. And well, no, there's your raid. So 4 squads in a platoon, and you can have different groups focusing on different things, or interchanging each other around, and maybe one group will switch to support one other group in their objective, and then they need to move to support another group, and you need to be timing around, so you need to do quick movements and adjust to what is going on. And that's where my main issue comes in with raids, is that they just tend to be static. It always is this one same thing. You go in there and you know exactly what's going to happen, step by step, minute by minute, or like damage done to damage tanked and stuff like that. It's a complete puzzle, and once you sorted the puzzle out, it really just comes down to, do I have the numbers, and not just like in people, but in the tanking, DPS stuff, numbers like that, and do people know where to stand when? And that's gonna get boring, in my opinion. That's me. Like, I know that people can probably find it enjoyable, but this is how I would make it better for me personally. Is like, I would want those encounters to be much more varied and much more random. I don't want to know exactly what I'm going to be up against. Like, sure, I will know that a boss will be of a certain category, so I can expect certain things from this boss, but I don't know exactly what he is going to do, when he is going to do things. And he might do something now that I've not seen in the 10 raids I've done before. So now I need to adjust to this new development. And the same can be done, with the trash mobs in between. Those can vary. They can come up with surprises. Suddenly I can get, I don't know, outflanked by a new spawn. You name it. Make the entire thing more dynamic. So each time you go in there, you're on your toes. You're watching out, no matter where you are in the raid. You're always like checking out, okay, are we ready? Do we have this? Oh shit, we're gonna get attacked there. Oh, what we do there? It puts this level of excitement in there, which I always feel is missing with raids. And I will come back to the example when Wrath of the Lich King, when I was raiding there, I literally started reading books during the raid, because you knew exactly what was going to happen. So I did not really need to pay much attention to the raid. And that's also, I think, why a lot of people, maybe that's also my PvP side coming in. I like to be challenged continuously to be involved in dynamic combat. And if you take that out of there, yeah, I don't mind running a raid a few times. But after a couple of times, I'm done with it. I'm not going to return to it because it's boring. So yeah, I would like the idea of more dynamic raids, more randomized stuff in there, keep you on your toes all the time. And also, like, I think your idea is very good in there. Like, split people up, different sorts of groups and leading to go different objectives. Maybe some groups have a more basic goal and others will do more jumping in between. So you also have like different levels of skill requirement within your raid groups. So it's not like everybody needs to be the best, but I can have some really good players that can do some critical stuff and some lesser players that can do the less critical stuff, which would make it also a little more involved in a way for larger portions of the community without making it too easy.
Okay, so I think it's me next.
Yep.
So for me, it's like the things around the raids, not really like the raid itself. So, for example, the build up for the story of the raid that I have is usually, oh, you're this hero or whatever. I don't really like that. It never really immerses me in the fact that like 1,000 other people do the same raid, and then you can also keep doing the same raid over and over again. It just not seem immersive. And then also, I don't really like instance content. It would be really nice if raids, and I think like we have the technology now to get raids to be in open world. I would really like that idea if it was in open world and people could like travel there. And once it's defeated, it actually meant something more than just, or let the next group do it. If people don't defeat it, maybe it gets worse, or if you just defeat it, things actually change from that raid. I haven't done many raids, but I can't really say much from it. That's about it.
I think these are all good ideas and good points. Something that I want to talk a little bit about is like conceptually, like when you're designing a game, I think the hardest thing in this discussion is you have to basically make the decision, what kind of game are you trying to create, to know what kind of raids you want to have in your game. So, for example, when Guild Wars 2 was propagated on the whole idea it was going to be an open quest zone, right? The living, like world, like whenever you walk around and like you do a quest for someone and like Farmer Joe helps you out. That's what they told us at the panel. I remember. It's like there's real consequence and real choice and you can affect the world is how Guild Wars 2 was sold to us. And so like remembering that and remembering obviously what you ended up getting, you kind of realize it's because they in part made an open world game and then tried to make a theme park game. And I think that honestly is just the biggest problem. And what I'm trying to say is that if you have a theme park game, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have your dungeons be open-ended or be open world. And what I mean is like not instanced. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because your whole point of your game is to give people the most contained experience, the best contained experience. And if you're trying to do that, I don't know, it just doesn't make, you see what I'm saying? Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why you would end up doing it that way. So I think it makes more sense when you're making your game. If you want to be a game that's raid-centric in the instanced raid sense, right, where everyone gets to try it out and you can race for times and do different raid content, then I think you should start looking at solutions within that. So maybe when they load into another zone, it's a raid zone, like somebody mentioned in chat, instead of just a raid. It's a zone of raids. Or maybe it's, for example, it is a raid, but it's a raid that allows for, as both of you guys mentioned, multiple groups to play it in different ways. Like maybe you have a group of rangers and you send them to go handle some boss or some beast or whatever, but then you send your other force. Like it'd be cool if raids started to make you break up your parties. If you're gonna make us have 10, 20, 50 people, why not like let us have like specialized tasks for each of these kind of groups to be able to do within the same raid? And again, that requires making theme park style content. But even if you make theme park style content, the no-brainer to me is just make it to where raids themselves can be changed by players. And I don't mean just like whenever they want, but I mean like if they sign up to do a kind of like they had it in Neverwinter Nights and Star Trek to an extent, where you have the Foundry system. You can kind of customize your raid. Maybe you don't get a reward for it, or maybe it's, I don't know exactly the specifics of how you would end up doing it, but just that point being that I think that's a way to look at doing it potentially. Like, to go back to a sandbox style game, if you're going to do a dungeon in a sandbox style game, then I completely agree with what Black Ruin said, which is like, ultimately speaking, I don't want that game to be instanced. To me, it just ruins the experience. If I'm playing a sandbox game and you're saying I get to impact my environment, I don't like the idea that somebody in the game could just load into some nowhereness and then I can't go in there. I don't like that. So I preferred how they did it in Darkfall, which is like, even though it was an instance, everyone could load into it. So like, I would rather it be something like that as some sort of middle ground versus just like, you have a sandbox style game, but then you just protect people in instances. It just, for me, it's a little bit mixed. I can understand trying to get some appeal for a different crowd, but I guess I see it as like, if you wanted to make more enjoyable, more impactful, cooperative, raid-like experiences, don't make it open-ended. Don't make it everyone can go into the zone and interact with each other, because that'll probably mess with things. But if you're going to make it instanced, now that you've made it instanced, you've basically made it easier to perform. So why not then add more tools into it? I don't know. That's just how I see it. So either open it, keep it open, and guess what? The players will create the content themselves. World bosses and world raids have existed for decades. So people are already familiar with the concept of going out and doing a raid on a boss where players can kill you. Like, a good amount of players, I would say, that have played older MMOs are used to that concept in some way, shape, or form. But, you know, how many people are used to playing a sandbox game, going into a sandbox, let's say, a situation where somebody's attacking some kind of boss and you get to make the decision. Are you going to help them? Are you going to attack them? Are you going to, like, not a lot of people have gotten the chance to go through those kind of decisions. And I think that's a large part of understanding what I'm trying to say. But ultimately, I see it like, either you have the open-ended chaos, right, where people are coming in and just fighting and killing, and you can't compete, you can't complete the boss because maybe some group decided to come fight you and you got to fight them now. You want that style of game? I love that style of game. That's what Darkfall was. Or maybe you just focus primarily on doing instance content, but doing it with a way to have some level of replayability. If you're not going to make NPCs or AI able to move, have certain behaviors, or you're not going to add a large enough raid or zone that has a variety of things that you could do in order to complete the said raid, no matter what, it's going to get boring and old. And to me, my biggest argument against raids and instance content in that line, like theme park style raids, is simply, I don't think it's really even worth the money. They're so expensive to do. Like, every developer who's talked about doing raids and building their game around it has talked about how expensive it is, how much labor it takes, right? How much time, investment, manpower. Like, I feel like maybe if you're trying to make money, if you're going to do a game that relies on group content and dungeons, why not make it more replayable? That actually is better for the longevity of your game. Well, that's kind of where the problem is because how do you monetize that versus making me pay for a new expansion? Seems sexier to a publisher, right?
Okay. Another point. Sorry. Another point that I was just reminded myself of was also making raids, all the bosses and stuff in raids actually sort of also have an open world presence, because that's something that I've always felt a lot of raids fail very much to do, is to actually have more than, it's like most games have maybe one or two of the characters throughout all of their raids be in the open world. All the rest are just these randoms that supposedly are dangerous, supposedly have some role in the big plot, and it's like, well, this is the first time you see him. I think that would be something that would be very great to do, is to actually give them a bit more of a presence in the open world and in the story itself, to sort of push this idea that's like, yeah, we gotta take care of this dude as well, not that he's just in the way of us. In regards to, like, I think in regards to like both of the points, like both with the instanced or the non-instanced raids, that one is that one I feel is very dangerous not to do, because it's like, I can think of like two scenarios. One, 1,000 people just comes in and just one shots a world boss, and it's like, well, that was it. We're done for today. Which, that one is problematic. Or the PvP one, where it's like nobody ever gets to do it, and it's like it's just a continued battle over whoever gets to kill the boss, and it's like, which for a PvP game is pretty great, but to some extent it does somewhat hamper the people who wants to do a bit more than just that. In regards to randomizing it, it's like I kind of want to agree. I think the only issue I have with it is that, like, a lot of it, is that raids are usually like these big long events, and as soon as you start throwing in random elements, a bit like co-op games, horde games, etc., I see certain issues with that, because those games, yeah, you can tolerate playing on like the highest difficulties, which is usually very difficult, and it's like, and just be screwed over by the system because it's selected to spawn just things you couldn't really do anything against. Interesting and all of that, but they usually also only take about half an hour to go through, if not even less. Whereas a raid can be hours, and if you then also throw into it this randomization that can screw you over even more, it's gonna be an entire day just trying to slowly scratch your way through it, which that certainly would elongate the content itself, but I think it will also make people very angry to some extent. It's like, I mean, it's like, we could have done it if it's not for this stupid thing that spawned. It's like stuff like that. I'm not entirely against the idea. I just think it's something that should be said, that it's like it has to be done really, really well, because otherwise you're screwing over people.
Someone in chat said every time the raid wipes, the main city gets invaded by mobs.
That would actually be kind of great.
That'd be hilarious.
That would be grief to the end of the earth.
Oh yeah, that's true. Just continuously.
I mean, most first ideas are gonna get grief, though. To be fair, so if we had time to work on it, maybe it could work. But yeah, as it would stand, I'm sure there's many ways to abuse that.
One thing I want to say for instance content is that I feel like a lot of it's sometimes a bit lazy, where people just like, or the developers make it so you can just click a button and you just automatically get teleported there. I think you can make instance almost feel like open world sometimes. Like if you have to travel to these places and do certain things to unlock like a dungeon or a portal that allows you to get into this raid, and then once you get into a raid, it's kind of transitions you into that world. Almost like if it's an open world, you can still make that into an instance. That like not making it like lazy and making it feel like it flows into the world. Like you can still make instance feel open world. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And then also for having open world raids, like you can still, people can be out like zergs and all that stuff. You can still have ways to stop zergs happening. I can't really think of the top of my head, but you could try to have the mobs split up into areas around the city, or to like split up people all around the map, so they're not all confined to this one area. And this is like one idea I thought of. Yeah, that's what I have right now.
To hop on what Penzero said a little bit, he said that Blizzard did get a lot of shit for doing the zombie plague, even though people always talk about it being a good event. one thing, a point that I want to make is that a lot of the time when it comes to actual events that affect the world or a raid or something, it's always going to be controversial. That's kind of the point, you know? Because if they went with the safe option, we wouldn't remember the zombie plague. But they went with something that was kind of a little bit risky. So like the fact that it did piss some people off is actually a good thing. It made them feel something, you know?
Can I talk now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. To sort of talk about what like Rune sort of talked about, is like sort of have this transition area in between this like the open world and into instance content. It's like, I think the thing is, on paper it sounds great and fine and all of that, but I think as I played WoW Classic, it's like, yeah, oh man, this is cool. It's like, oh, it's cool, we have to go in here. That's cool the first 10 times. The 20th time, it's an annoyance. Like, I cannot even mention how angry it makes me, even just thinking about it. It's like, oh, great, I have to spend 10 minutes just to get to the freaking instance. It's like, oh my lord. Which, I mean, I guess, like, it's MMOs. Like, they gotta, it's like they kind of have to kneecap you all the way. It's just, it's hard to accept because it's like, you can, it's like, I just want to go play another game at that point. It's like, I'll go play a co-op game. Same experience, I just don't have to freaking go for 10 minutes through a bunch of mobs who don't drop anything interesting.
I mean, that's why I always talk about multiplayer online RPGs for that exact reason.
Yeah.
All right. In regards to the like more sandbox and open world raids, and people are like, oh, well, people are going to zerk it and yada yada yada. I would say that's fine. That's part of being a sandbox and an open world. It's like, if there is a challenge out there that should be, that is designed that this boss can take on so many people, and you decide to show up with 3 times that number, fair game. The point is only is like, it's still probably going to drop the same one thing. So do you really want to do that? Because people tend to go after the gear. So the odds are probably more in the favor that people will be trying to find this boss and try to kill it with as small as a group as possible to increase their relative rewards. And that's another thing, like, you should not make these things static in their location. Like, they should be able to move around and go around, so you don't know where they are, so you can just run into them, which avoids people always being there and trying to zerk it every time. So you keep these things mobile. And another thing that you can do is, instead of having these big evil guys being your raid bosses, there can be different factions in your world, and these bosses can be part of certain factions. So killing said boss will also have a consequence in the form of, hey, that faction now will like you a lot less, but maybe some other factions will like you a lot more. So there are ways to balance these things around in a very in-game and organic manner, so that people don't really want to zerg it, but also that they will be very considerate in what boss they may want to attack. And the same thing can be like, what are the consequences to dying in that game? If the consequences to dying are higher than in most games these days, then perhaps people do want to say, like, maybe we'll bring a few more people extra and we deal with lesser loot gains. Like, it's going to be a balancing factor in that aspect. But in the end, it's like, at the point is also, it's like, when you start to wonder, like, if you go into an open world scenario, sandbox, it's like, does the terminology like of a raid really still apply? Because I think at that point it's more of a general part of the world that you play in. So I don't really think it's really a raid anymore. And that's why my initial answer was really focused upon the traditional instances raid, because that's how I see a raid. And if I played my open world games, I never really saw these things as a raid. It's just like a group activity. Because the feeling of it is also tends to be quite different. Like this raid is really, I start here and I go through a couple of bosses, and at the end is the real big mad guy. It's more of a story event to me than a thing that you would really find in an open world. So that's, I think, one of the differences in that you can look at it. But yeah. Coming back to then open world is that like balance it out in organic manners, and also just accept the fact that people will optimize regardless of what you're going to do. People always try to gain the most out of any given situation that you do, because we're gamers. We will be exploiting, figuring everything out, calculating it, doing the math. Like spreadsheets will be made. People will find out the most optimal way to do things, and the only way you can really stop that to a degree is making things random. And yes, that can be really annoying if you lose out then. But, well, you're going to lose in fights. That's part of playing a game. And like the idea that people are like, oh, but you should be able to, complete the raid, to me, it's always been a little bit ridiculous. It's like, I'd rather have that raid, even if that instant version, like I'd rather have that continuously being challenging and different each time, and maybe not be able to complete it each time, than having it being the static thing, which I know I can just beat each week. Because we 20 people completely figured it out.
Yeah. As Carl sort of mentions, like that people will exploit the system, and I think that's also to some extent why a lot of MMO developers don't exactly always go in that direction. Simply because it's like we know that people will quite literally ruin a game for themselves. I mean, Card, you and I especially know this from PlanetSide 2. It's like people will optimize, they'll zerg. It doesn't matter how much they're ruining the fun for themselves, the opposition, and the third faction. It does not matter. Winning is above having actual fun. And I think that is sort of where the big problem comes in, right? Because it's like, they'll zerg world bosses and just kill them in a second. Kill them in a second and hunt them down with 1,000 people. And
it doesn't really happen though in like open world games, because other people want to kill them as well. So it's like it's never as like easy as like everyone just zergs. Usually, if someone zergs, other people are going to tell you that, hey, they're zerging, and this is from Darkfall. And then we'd show up with our small group and then just try and kill a couple stragglers or something. Like, there's always some game everywhere.
Oh, yeah. It's not saying that it's impossible or an imperfect system. It's just, it is one of those things that people tend to always detract a game for. Equally so, it's like, oh, people want to kill them. It's like, yeah, exactly, and that's why you zerg the world boss. It's like, don't do it with as few people as you can do. Do it with as many people as you can do, so that you really secure that loot. And it's like, great.
Yeah, but especially an issue if the world bosses are known all the time. Like if you don't know when you can encounter one, and you just encounter one at random, and you're like to your guild, like, guys, get over here, but keep it down, then hey, you suddenly can be fighting this world boss without anybody else noticing it. Like there's many ways.
There are solutions. Yeah,
there are solutions to a lot of problems, of course.
Most of the problems are created by making the system closed. It's like by making it closed like that, you're gonna have that problem.
I make a closed system.
I'd somewhat disagree, but I think want his turn.
Yeah. I just want to say I haven't done many raids, but I've seen a lot of raids, and people always hype up raids to be this massive, massive, massive thing, and then I see them just do it in a day, like if it's nothing. And then you also say the developers it's a lot of it's a lot of cost in developing these raids. And I'm like, well, I feel like raids should really be these things that people spend maybe even months, possibly, preparing for these raids, and they could fail over and over and over again. And when lemposs said, "Oh, after the 20th time, doing these transition things," I'm like, if you've done 20 raids, I feel like that's way too many. Like, raids should really be this once an opportunity things. I think.
No. That was not my point. My point was that if you had this transition into the content, into the instance itself, where it's like you have to go past these elite mobs or whatever, and you have to do it with the group as well. It's essentially an extension of the dungeon. It just doesn't serve a purpose. And it's an annoyance to get past every single time, because you know that there is nothing gained from this other than just being kneecapped by the game itself.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying about the doing the lobby game makes more sense in that context, because at least the lobby game isn't pretending to be an MMO. It's just saying, hey, click this button, buddy, and get right in.
It's their problem there is you're missing that build-up. And I think part of what Black Rune's trying to say is like part of the excitement of a raid should come from building up to this raid. So if you just sit there and you're like, click, I'm going in there, you miss a lot of this psychological background of like, okay, we spent the last 2 weeks gathering the resources, we got all of things ready, we talked over the plans, we think we expect this and this will happen in there, we're gonna go for it. Tonight is the night, everybody took an extra day of work and we're going for it. Like, at that point it becomes something special. And I think that's one fact, like current raids are not special. Like, people
don't want it that way though.
Time.
You're making an argument card based off of like what should be, but like someone in chat mentioned, a lot of the problems that have happened because of raids are simply because people who don't actually want to do a raid have asked to do raids. You know what I'm saying? Like the people who don't actually want to go through what you're talking about, which is 100% I believe as well, they just don't want to do that. They just want to get in.
Okay, I'm going to be very simple then. And I'm going to be very brutally honest. Too bad. Like, if you don't want to do these things, like this is part of the game, like this is a part of a game, then you can choose, okay, I don't want that, then you're not going to do that. Just like there are players that won't do PvP because they don't want to do that. I actually get really, and I think you can notice in my voice, but I get so fucking annoyed that like we have to cater, like everybody has to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And even if you want to do that, like make the story mode raid. Like, here you go, guys, you can go through it, you can experience the story, so you know what happened, but you're not really gonna get anything of value out of it, but hey, you can be through it. But the people that really want that epic challenge, that want that feeling, that want that reward, that want to be able to say, like, listen, guys, we fucking did it, they should be able to get that. And that also puts, as a player that's in that game, you look up to those players that complete those things. When I started playing World of Warcraft, I looked up to those players that walked around in those cool fucking armors, because I knew what the fuck they had to do to get that. And I wanted that. Like, I saw, like, the reason I leveled up my hunter finally was I saw somebody with a cool looking bow and I was like, fuck it, I want that bow. What do I need to get that bow? That's what got me to level up my hunter. I was level 40 for months because I did not care. And then you see it and then you go for it. And I think that's something that, as the developers need to be able to just stand up there and say, like, this is what we're going to do. And I think if you put a world together that's good enough, the game that's great enough, people will deal with it. And people will accept it. And people are like, you know what? Like, yeah, there should be a challenge to this. Because a lot of people also say, like, yeah, there's not really any challenge in it. No, we took it all out because everybody wanted to have easy mode. And you can't have, like, easy mode, hard mode.
I was going to say that.
Like Warcraft does. Because that doesn't give you that same, like, it doesn't give that same feeling. Like, if that raid is really something that only very few guilds really beat the raid, it's something really, really, really special.
As Pinsero puts out quite well, the problem is then you end up making content for 1% of your population, which...
That's not really true, though, because I hear this argument a lot. That's only true if you do some weird-ass hard mode difficulty that nobody wants to play, because it's just arbitrarily hard. Like, if you actually did a challenging and, like, innovative experience, you don't think people would be like, damn, this is pretty fucking cool, even if it was hard, you know? I feel like
People
it
would
being
do
hard
it.
would be would be the non-consequential part of it. It'd be more if it was good.
It just takes more time for more people to do it. Like a more casual guild will take longer to build up to be able to complete it. But in the end, the way most MMOs work with the linear progression is like at some point you're gonna build up to a level that you can actually complete it. And
I mean, if
that's
they
fine.
need to grind out a bunch of stuff, then I would to some extent actually say, yeah, people wouldn't want to do that. Not when other games exist where you can get sort of kind of the same experience.
I don't
from
think
that.
you get that same experience.
Oh no,
And that's the
it's
whole argument. It's
no,
like you
I
get
mean, it's never going to be the exact same experience. I mean, that's
No,
the same thing. It's like
yeah, but
Arma 3 is not the same experience as Battlefield, but there's a ton more people playing Battlefield for a reason.
yes. And that's the other thing I say. Make your game for your audience. Like
Yeah.
say it out there like, okay, I'm gonna target this smaller audience that's out there. And there are people that want these kind of experience. And actually the stories of these kind of experiences tend to bring in more people. Like how many people started playing EVE Online because they heard all the epic tales? Like that's a lot of people started playing EVE Online because of that.
Yeah, but it does sort of end up with us like, oh well, you should focus on your audience. The problem is just like if your audience is only that, or is only that sort of semi-hardcore group who is willing to put in a ton of hours to sort of get ahead, then I think you're going to end up having some issues. Which,
But difficulty to me, like, I understand your point, but I just want to add that difficulty isn't just really fucking hard or easy as fuck. And I feel like that's only become the narrative because of what MMOs became. But like, there's plenty of MMOs that I've played when I was younger where they're hard, but they were only hard because you just didn't know certain shit. Or they're only hard because, you had to learn, maybe something you were missing in your build or something. Like, it was never hard to the point to where it was like, Dark Souls hard, like it's the whole nature of the game is being hard. Even in PK games, they were hard because you could be PK'd, not because the game itself was like so challenging or so difficult. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't think difficulty level needs to be so extreme to where you're doing, as you said, lemposs, 8-hour days, because while some people might want to do that, I would also agree it's probably just a small percentage of people, just 1% of your audience maybe is willing to do something like that. So you don't have to make a big portion of your content like that, but you could make a big portion of your content still have at least some level of challenge to where, I don't think anybody here is going to argue that Minecraft is super difficult, and yet there's hardcore servers and people try and do one life playthroughs, and that's pretty challenging to do. So I think it just depends.
I think one final thing I would like to add.
Difficult. I'm talking.
I was actually before you.
Oh God.
No, for me it's very simple. Like I want to add, like difficulty does not have to mean you need to grind 8 hours a day. Difficulty means difficulty can be in game mechanics as well. And just means like, okay, maybe, if you want to complete it, be amongst the first that can do it, you need to play 8 hours a day. But maybe if you're the casual player, like I am a casual player, maybe I'll put 10 hours in the game in a week. I can still complete that challenge, but maybe I'll need to do it 3 months later.
But I think that is quite problematic that you then like have that really elongated sort of path towards it.
If that's the only thing to do, I agree.
yeah, if especially that, but also in regards to sort of what would you call it? It's like sort of incentivizing people to play. It's like, hey, why don't you play for a month so you get access to the raid at like 1 hour a day? It's like, I don't know, man. That's a tough call. And also in regards to difficulty, I think sort of the biggest problem with MMOs in that regard, it doesn't matter how good you are. You still need to go through the hoops that everyone else does to get to that place where it's like where you could get into the raid, and it's like that. And that's also why I, for example, point to something like co-op games and horde mode games, because you can go into something like Left 4 Dead, and the very first time you play, you can play the hardest difficulty. And if you're skilled enough, yeah, you're gonna win. I can't do that with a raid. It's like I have to jump through all the hoops, right? And I think that's where sort of that big problem comes in, is like with where it's like it's sort of where MMOs sort of try to some extent triggers, and it's something that I think MMOs developers have somewhat of a problem sort of balancing entirely correctly, right? Because like to some extent you want people sort of going through the grind so that they don't give up on the game until they're done with the grind, but you also don't want to make the grind too long because that then exhausts people. I think that's probably where that sort of really long, intensive path towards raiding is something that could, to some extent, like just tire people out. And it's like, you know what? I'm not gonna go through this process just to see this raid. I'm gonna go play a game that where I can use my skill at any given moment.
All right. Well, I felt like we had a lot of good discussion, and we could have a lot more. Clearly, my head's starting to feel like it's slowing down, which usually is a good time to stop. It's been about 3.5 hours. We started a little bit later today, but we went a little bit later, so we made up for it, I think. And then also, we got to have 3 people on the podcast today, joining us for the roundtable discussions that we had, since there was a few, and then the roundtable discussion, which honestly, I felt like we kind of slowed ourselves, we stopped ourselves a bit, because I had a couple more things that I could get to as well, but I think the hard part for me is that I have to, from a macro perspective, talk from a gameplay perspective I don't personally subscribe to, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of these theme park style games aren't really for me, so it's kind of like I don't want to just be like, oh, it's not like this, because that's just short-sighted. So I also try and look at how they would do it if they made a game, like, or if they tried to innovate a raid. How would a very theme park style game do it to make something more replayable? Or how would they make a new raid that was somehow could buck the trend of their previous raids? So that's why I was going between the sandbox and the theme park thing a little bit, but ultimately speaking, like Card said, theme park has this problem primarily. Sandbox doesn't as much, because in a sandbox, a big group of people is called a raid. It's not a particular thing. It's more like a boss, and he's out in the world, and you go kill him as a big, Zerg group or whatever else. But anyway, yeah, I'll pass it to everybody to say goodbye, pretty much. Thanks for stopping by and joining us on episode 63. I'm glad I remembered, of the 6 Pixels Under podcast.
Is it time to say goodbye?
Yeah, it's time to say goodbye.
Finally.
Okay. Free Donkey Kong!
It's time to say goodbye.
Good night.
See you,
That's what I'll
Randall.
say.
Night. See you later. Alrighty, so that was the end of Free Donkey Kong. That was the end of the podcast today. I don't have much else to get to. Pretty tired and beat. This week was this weekend, I should say, was just crazy. I had to go to a funeral. Had to deal with like a lot of family trouble kind of stuff, and then also I've still been getting used to moving. I'm not even 100% moved in yet, so been dealing with that a little bit as well. But other than that, I'm good. I'm just tired, pretty much. In real life, death of a game, pretty much. Yeah, no problem, Yosoi Tai, and thanks everybody else for stopping by today. Thanks to those who subbed today. Thanks for those who stopped by on the roundtable and chatted with me, and those who were chatting with me in Twitch chat and wherever else you were chatting with me in. There is a lot of other things we could have got to, a lot of other interesting topics to go towards when it comes to things like raids and stuff. And so I think when we really want to have deep discussions about certain things, about like how to make a certain kind of raid, we should just dedicate some time to just having a whole podcast on it. Because I honestly feel like there's certain topics within MMOs that might even just require their own podcast. Yeah, and so maybe we'll do that. That way we don't have this problem of feeling like we're trying to cram so much into one when we're doing a creative podcast, one where it talks a lot about design. Because design concepts, guys, take a long time to set up. I can't just say like, oh, it's a raid and it works like this, because that's not doing my due diligence. As an educator, right, a content creator, an MMO nerd, I have to do my best to explain the concepts in a way that makes sense to somebody who doesn't play the game. Because when I make my Death of a Game videos, the reason why they're not like so detail specific that they look like they're designed by somebody who just played the game right now is because I design the videos to be for people who maybe played the game years ago and don't remember it. Maybe never even played the game. It's also designed for people. It's got the introductory part of my videos that I do, my Death of a Game videos, where I kind of talk about what the game is, like on a basic level. I might not even describe it that way personally, but you have to describe it in a way where it's the most digestible for more people, basically. Any more questions though before I leave, guys? Whoops, not trying to drag that away. I'll drag the other one away. I'll let you guys ask me some questions. Just at me in Twitch chat right now, and then I'll head out. Hey, question. Have you messed with Camelot Unchained any? I'm in closed beta right now, but because of the NDA, I can't really talk about it. Ooh, yeah, I don't have enough time to get to it today, Alundris. I wanted to, but I'll say I saw Rise of Skywalker, and this is not gonna be my review because it's gonna take way too long. And to keep it short and sweet, I liked it less than The Last Jedi, but I liked it more than The Force Awakens because I think it actually at least tried to like do different things and take certain risks. What I will also add is that I personally thought it was a little bit cheesy at parts, but largely overall was happy with how they tried to right some of the wrongs of The Last Jedi. I'll think overall, though, for me, I'm just glad that the Skywalker trilogy is over, or at this point, double trilogy, the series. I'm just glad that the Skywalker series is over, because honestly, I never really liked Skywalker that much anyway. I always thought Luke Skywalker was one of my least interesting characters in the series. And having a whole entire like plot point attached to the Skywalker name, you guys can kind of see why I was more into the expanded universe. Just Skywalker story is iconic Star Wars, but it's not something for me personally that, you know, entices me and gets me really excited, you know? What gets me excited is things like Darth Bane, you know, Thrawn trilogy. You know, I like Clone Wars, Rebels. I liked Rogue One as well. I like The Mandalorian. I like things that maybe aren't so stereotypical Star Wars, at least like when it comes to the Force. So overall, to give you guys what my ratings were for all three of the recent movies, The Force Awakens, I'd give it about a 6. Last Jedi, I gave it a 7.5. And the most recent one, Rise of Skywalker, is that what they're calling it? I give that one in between the 6 and the 6, or in the 7.5. So I'd say it's like a 7. I think I said Last Jedi was either a 7 or 7.5. And I would put the Rise of Skywalker in the 6.75, 6.5 kind of territory, somewhere around there. Yeah, there you go. 6 3/4, if I'm going to say half. So I'd give it around there, which is like I think it's better than The Force Awakens, because I personally don't want to watch The Force Awakens again. I didn't like it, and I thought it was kind of boring. Like, well, okay, I liked it as a movie when I saw it in theaters. I didn't like it as a fan after I saw it a couple of times and was like, it's basically a New Hope 2.0. I like The Last Jedi because it actually attempted, I think, rather poorly, but at least it attempted to handle some more mature themes, and themes that the Star Wars universe, movies-wise, has done a kind of poor job of explaining. Yeah, no, Thrawn is appeared in Rebels already. In fact, he interacted with the main character, Ezra. Ezra Bridger? He already I think they were supposed to go, like, search for something. The last time I watched, I'm not trying to spoil it too much, but long story short, Thrawn is already canon. He's been brought back. Trust me, they gave him a book already as well, because they have Timothy Zahn, the author, and New Disney. That was one of the first things they did, was give him a new book. From my normal viewer brain, it was all right. My lore brain had constant problems. So for the newest Star Wars movie, if I use my cinema brain, I would say, just like most of the Star Wars movies, including the most recent ones, cinematically was just kind of it felt like they were trying to shoot it modern, when Star Wars is a lot more about contrast and set design. And so I feel like they need to actually learn from Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and actually go back to more of the classic Star Wars style, in my opinion, with the puppets and the effects and the way you shoot certain camera angles. I couldn't help but feel like when I was watching Rise of Skywalker, it kind of reminded me of like how Star Trek fans feel about the new Star Trek movies. A little bit too much lens flare and kind of like too, does that make sense? Like, do you guys understand my comparison? It's just, exactly, Card. It was the newest trilogies for me were good popcorn movies. I very much enjoy going to the movie theater. I love going to the movie theater. I don't go that much, but I love every time I go. I enjoyed them. So that's my first bar, right? I passed that. As a fan of Star Wars, when it comes to the movies, I have very low standards, and it's because I personally, again, don't view the movies that religiously as other people do. I'm not saying it's bad that you guys do. If you love the movies, you love the movies. I love the expanded universe way more than I love the movies. So it's just a lot easier for me to be impartial about that sort of stuff and look at it from the cinema perspective and then a Star Wars perspective. If I look at the newest trilogy from a Star Wars perspective as like a fan, it was too safe. It was marred in a lot of, or good ideas marred in a lot of poor execution. The characters were just dry as all hell, and I think that was primarily because they were made to be very accessible to a broad, group of people, versus like actually stand for something particularly. Because there's not a lot of controversial characters in the movies, period, right? And like one of the best characters accidentally kind of became one of the best characters, in my opinion. Like Kylo Ren, if you guys have seen the most recent movie, I feel like he is one of the better characters of the entire trilogy, especially after you watch the most recent movie. If anything, Adam Driver, I feel like kind of has been carrying a bit, almost like an Obi-Wan effect. I know he got memed on with the whole Swallow things, but like, if you guys have seen the most recent movie, you have to admit that he's done probably one of the best jobs at acting. So I think it's a shame that they couldn't have done Kylo's story better, because they had so much to go off of. Like, again, I'm not going to have any spoilers here, but at this point, if you guys haven't read the expanded universe, and most of you haven't read the expanded universe in regards to the Solo twins, a lot of the stuff that they're doing right now in the newest Star Wars trilogies, they've already done before. In fact, I'll go as far to say, for those who've read and watched the most recent one, most of that plot is ripped from another story already. So it's already been done. So I've always found it funny when people will disregard my expanded universe knowledge or like experience, and I'm like, but I could have predicted this plot if you guys listened to me. But like, y'all are saying, oh, come on, I'm gonna do it differently. And it's like, I mean, they already have all of that writing there. Seems like it makes more sense to just kind of glean some of that off and then kind of copy some things here and there, which is exactly what they did. Oh, but it's not canon anymore. They killed all the canon so they could steal the canon, basically. They killed the expanded universe largely so they could take the expanded universe's ideas. All the actors are great, they just don't have a good script. I will say that that's probably the right answer. Most of the time I've talked to people who've been involved in film, they will argue that when it comes to quality actors, the quality actors that you can afford to pay for a movie like Star Wars, it's probably not the actors. It's probably more like the script and the way that they're written. Because look at what's his name? Anakin. Hayden, what's his last name? Hayden Christensen? Is it Christensen? Look at his experience. Like, he's gotten awards for other roles before, and yet we largely remembered him as like a poor actor. And I don't think it's because he's a poor actor at all. In fact, when I watched the prequels again, but I watched the fan edit this time, so they cut out a lot of the bullshit, I was pleasantly surprised at how good his character actually is once you get rid of a lot of the bad dialogue. It does. I mean, I literally just said that, lemposs, so it's funny. But it's true. Like, I'm noticing that a lot. Like, the dialogue is like, even in the movie theater, there was a couple of scenes where like they said some things, and I was like, I would look around at everyone else, and I was like, did anyone else hear that shit? That was kind of like cheesy as fuck. I'll also say this movie was a lot more serious too. There wasn't as much humorous scenes, and I would think that that actually was kind of a good thing. To be fair, the expanded universe was never canon. Well, parts of the expanded universe aren't canon, but technically some of the expanded universe is canon because it's been taken and then introduced into actual canon. Like, for example, Kreia, Revan, the Old Republic. These are all things that came out of the expanded universe. They weren't originally canon, but they became canon. So I guess, like, usually when I have discussions about canon, I don't think people realize that something starts as non-canon, then becomes canon usually. Unless it's created by the official creator, then it's just canon right out the bat, right? Like, if it's an officially produced show or movie, that's typically considered canon already. But a lot of the time, I think when it comes to the whole canon discussion, it doesn't really matter anymore because they got rid of most of it. But they're bringing back a lot of characters, the more memorable characters from the expanded universe. I guess that's what matters the most. Is they're taking some of the ideas and some of the characters from the expanded universe, but they're getting rid of a lot of the more kind of, honestly, like, lowbrow sci-fi. Like, I don't even think all of it's good, even though I talk highly about it. The reason why it's not all good is because they use so many different authors. In fact, like, through one of the series, I think they changed authors every couple of books. So it was like, sometimes you'd have drops in quality or increases in quality, and it was just like, I honestly don't think it's really that bad that Disney wiped out the canon. I'm just more annoyed that they're trying to act like they're now reinventing the wheel when they're kind of just taking the same shit and slightly changing it. Writing as a whole feels like it's on the mend. Sorry, I meant the pre-trilogy stuff is safe canon-wise, but post... Okay. Yeah, post ROTJ stuff, definitely. Yeah, in fact, as it stands right now, my personal canon knowledge, and I'm a massive Star Wars nerd, between the end of the original trilogy and about Mandalorian or so, that area for me, I'm kind of... I know it's a newer area because it's obviously, like, literally newer, but I'm not so versed in the lore and those kind of time frames. So I need to, like, do some more research. Lucas kind of allowed anyone to do a Star Wars spinoff if they gave him enough cash, then labeled it as non-canon until fans liked it. It kind of seems that way in some ways, especially when you take into consideration things like there are certainly things that Lucas has taken directly from Expanded Universe. For example, the 501st, right? A lot of the stories with Fixer, Rex, and the clones come from Karen Traviss. So whenever they brought Karen Traviss in to help write that stuff into Rebels, and I think also Clone Wars, she also wrote in that as well. That comes from the expanded universe. Yep, and that's the worst part about it all for me, Captain Rex, is like I can't even recommend those books to people, even though I love those books, especially if you like that kind of sci-fi, like squadron type of story, because they basically just undid a lot of the cool stories that happen in those books. It's unfortunate. If you guys aren't really familiar with it, essentially they early on tried to say that, oh, Mandalorians are becoming peace-loving Mandalorians, and so they're no longer going to be fighting and stuff. And blah, blah, blah. They kind of undid that already with The Mandalorian, and I'm so glad. But that's where it was headed. They were going to turn Mandalorians into pacifists. And, like, that's why I could never really watch Clone Wars, because that shit just pissed me off. I think it was Clone Wars that did it. And then Rebels righted the wrong, didn't they? Because they had a, what's her name? I always forget her damn name. What's the girl with the short hair? She's a Mandalorian. And she's part of the crew in Rebels. I always forget her damn name. But they had that whole episode where she got to go see her family. Sabine. Yeah, there you go. So they already have Sabine, and she got to go meet her family and stuff in Rebels already. So we know that there's other Mandalorians out there. Obviously, with the Mandalorian out, we for sure know there's other Mandalorians. Is it the Christmas special, Ken? All right, on that note, it's just funny now that Death Watch became more good. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm talking about, the whole Death Watch thing, but I do have a slight criticism with the current Mandalorian, and I've talked about it before, so I won't go over it again. But I do think they kind of show him as too good, which is kind of confusing considering he grew up in such a different morality than our morality. So why are we looking at him and thinking he's good? Means that he was kind of written a different way, you know, like to appeal to an audience perhaps, because he's the bad guy but not really the bad guy. I just say make him the bad guy. Like when Han immediately shot Greedo and it was just like boom, that was the end of the scene. I was like, that guy's a criminal, but he's the guy I want to follow, you know, like story-wise. Like I want to see what he's about, what this like smuggler guy is about. Versus like with Mandalorian, sometimes I kind of feel like he's almost like he'd be like my buddy old pal, when it's like we come from such different walks of life. Like why do I feel like this guy would be my buddy? I feel like it's because they show him as too like friendly, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. You think it's just more because he's sympathetic to Baby Yoda because of his childhood? Yeah, that's a good point. Is Kyle Katarn only in Legends? Unfortunately, I think Rogue One confirmed that Kyle Katarn is not going to be the Kyle Katarn we think. I don't remember exactly why, so somebody can look that up, because I'm tired as hell now, so my lore brain is one of the first things to go, because that one takes a lot of memory, and my lore brain has never been that great. But if you guys remember and you tell me things, I will remember them and be like, oh yeah, this thing, yeah. It seems like Mando might not be a Mando after all. I mean, if he's adopted, then he is a Mando. Still, by law, according to their system, you can be adopted. They changed that, the ancient race of Mandalorians changed that like thousands of years ago. And it was probably to keep their tribe alive because they were slowly dying out. And so they opened up recruitment for Mandalorians to all alien races. And that's why any race can become a Mandalorian. But once whatever race you are technically doesn't really matter once you put the helmet on, you know. Mandalorians should be like the light side bounty hunter from SWTOR at best. They're only good if it means less effort to get their money. And that's kind of what I was thinking. I thought they would do that more with the Mandalorian. And it seems like instead of going that angle, they're going more like he's almost like a trooper. You know what I mean? Like if you play the trooper, like he's a good guy trooper. Yeah, Revan also killed a lot of them, to be fair. Good point. Yeah, depending on when he had the culture and when he was adopted, and also where he was raised, because not all Mandalorian tribes are the same. They were only ever united under Mandalore, right? But when they're not united under Mandalore, there's like hundreds of tribes, and they don't always agree. So I think that's going to be interesting to see if they go into any of that. How, even though you're Mandalorian, sometimes you don't necessarily agree with the other Mandalorians, and sometimes you don't even know that they're necessarily out there. So even encountering them, period, would be interesting for the story. But all right, I will see you guys later. I'm heading out. I'm hungry and tired. So thanks for stopping by and watching today's podcast, episode 63. Good to see you guys as always, every week. Well, barring, difficulties. But every week pretty much, Monday. Not going to be 30 minutes later as it was today going forward. But, well, you guys know that we're doing it live, so sometimes we have technical difficulties. No rest, no, I'm sleeping, man. See you later, guys. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas.